Rachel's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it echoing in her ears. Her hands trembled as she held the phone against her chest, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. On the other end of the line, minutes earlier, the shaky voice of a nurse from Parkland Memorial Hospital had just changed everything. "Mrs. Morrison, your ex-husband was in a serious accident. You're listed as his emergency contact. He's in the ICU and, well, the situation is critical. He keeps repeating the name of someone called Ethan. Do you know this person?" Rachel looked at the 6-year-old boy sitting on the living room floor, completely absorbed in lining up his toy cars in a perfect color sequence. Ethan, her son, the son David had abandoned 3 years ago when the autism diagnosis hit their lives like a hurricane. The same man who disappeared without looking back was now calling out the name of the boy he rejected. "Mommy is going to step out for a little bit, sweetheart," Rachel whispered, but Ethan didn't lift his eyes from the cars. He never did when he was in his routine. How was it possible that the man who destroyed everything was now asking for the child he abandoned? How was it possible that, after 3 years of absolute silence, David was lying in a hospital bed, calling for Ethan? And the question that stabbed her heart the most, what was she supposed to do now? Rachel closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible decision pressing down on her shoulders. There was a part of her that wanted to leave him alone, that wanted him to feel the same pain he caused when he turned his back on them. But there was another part, the part she had built brick by brick over these 3 years of struggle, the part that had learned about forgiveness and compassion through the pure eyes of her son. She didn't know it yet, but that phone call was about to begin a journey that would test everything she believed about forgiveness, redemption, and the kind of love that transcends even the deepest pain. 3 years earlier, Rachel Morrison was at the peak of happiness. Her small craft shop in the Bishop Arts District in Dallas was beginning to flourish. Rachel's creations had become a charming refuge for people seeking unique, handcrafted, personalized decor. The exposed brick walls displayed her creations: hand-painted frames, dried flower arrangements, paintings with inspirational phrases in delicate calligraphy. David, her husband of 8 years, worked as a sales manager at a tech company. They lived in a cozy house in Oak Cliff with a backyard where Ethan, then 3 years old, loved chasing butterflies on spring mornings. Life looked like a perfect painting hanging on the wall until the colors began to fade. Ethan had always been a different baby. He was slow to speak, avoided eye contact, was fascinated by objects that spun. Rachel, with her sharpened maternal instinct, knew something was different, but David insisted that every child had their own pace. "You're overreacting, Ratch," he said, flipping through his tablet during dinner. "My cousin was late to talk too, and he's a lawyer today." But Rachel couldn't ignore the signs. Ethan didn't respond to his own name, didn't point at things he wanted, had inexplicable meltdowns when his routine changed. She began researching obsessively in the quiet hours of the night, while David slept beside her, unaware of the storm forming. It was on a hot July afternoon, in the office of Dr. Patricia Chun, a renowned pediatric neurologist in Dallas, that Rachel's world changed forever. "Autism spectrum disorder, level 2. The doctor said gently but firmly. "Ethan will need intensive interventions, behavioral therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. It's a long journey, but with the right support, he can make significant progress." Rachel felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her feet. She looked at Ethan, who was spinning a toy car on the office floor, completely unaware of the conversation that was changing the course of his life. Silent tears ran down her face as she squeezed David's hand, seeking support, seeking someone to share the weight of that moment. But when she looked at her husband, she saw something that made her blood run cold. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't determination. It was rejection. It was denial. It was anger. "This can't be right," David said, his voice taking on an irritated edge. "He's just a 3-year-old kid. All kids are different. This is medical exaggeration for profit." "Mr. Morrison," Dr. Chun began with patience, "I understand this is hard to process, but the earlier we start interventions—" "No," David interrupted, standing up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Rachel, we're leaving." But Rachel didn't move. She looked at the doctor, then at her son, then at her empty hands resting on her lap. She knew, deep in her heart, she had always known. And now it had a name, a path, a direction. "David," she whispered. "We need to hear what she has to say." "No, we don't," he replied, already walking toward the door. "My son is normal. This is a waste of time." In that air-conditioned office, working hard to fight the Texas July heat, the first crack appeared, one that would eventually shatter the Morrison family completely. The following months were the darkest of Rachel's life. She began taking Ethan to therapy 3 times a week at the Children's Medical Center. The routine was exhausting, waking up early, preparing Ethan with patience to avoid meltdowns, driving through heavy Dallas traffic, sitting in waiting rooms while therapists worked with her son, then returning home to continue the exercises. The shop began to suffer. Rachel no longer had the energy or time to create her handcrafted pieces with the same love as before. The shelves that used to be filled with new items now displayed the same products for weeks. Regular customers began noticing her absence, her lack of enthusiasm. But the worst wasn't the shop. The worst was watching her marriage die slowly. David started coming home later and later. When he was physically present, he was emotionally absent. He avoided Ethan, avoided conversations about autism, avoided the reality that had settled into their home. "You need to come to the meeting with the therapist next week," Rachel said one night as she washed the dinner dishes. Ethan was already asleep, and the house was wrapped in that heavy silence that had become common. "I'm busy," David replied without looking at her, his eyes fixed on the TV. "David, he's your son." Rachel's voice trembled, filled with a frustration that had been growing for months. "He's not the son I expected." David threw the words like knives, still not taking his eyes off the screen. Rachel dropped the plate into the sink with more force than intended. She turned to face him, her heart pounding wildly. "What did you just say?" Finally, David looked at her. His eyes were cold, distant, as if he had left long before his body followed. "You heard me, Rachel. I didn't sign up for this. I wanted a normal child. I wanted to play ball with him, teach him to ride a bike, see him graduate, not be trapped in therapy rooms for the rest of my life." "He can still do those things," Rachel said, tears beginning to blur her vision. "He just needs support, love, and a mother who's willing to sacrifice everything for him." David interrupted, standing up from the couch. "But I'm not you, Rachel. I can't do this. I look at him and all I see are limitations, problems, a life I didn't choose." The words fell like bombs in the silence of the living room. Rachel felt her legs weaken and had to brace herself against the kitchen counter to avoid collapsing. She had always known David was struggling, but hearing it out loud, hearing that he rejected his own son for not fitting his expectations, was a pain she had no words to describe. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I'm completely serious," David replied, and for the first time in months, his voice carried conviction. "I can't take this anymore, Rachel. This isn't the life I want. This isn't the son I want." "So what are you saying? That you're giving up on him? Abandoning him?" David ran a hand through his hair, taking a deep breath. "I'm saying I need to leave. This is suffocating me. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when nothing is fine." Rachel felt something inside her break in half. "If you walk out now, if you abandon your son when he needs you the most, there's no going back, David. You'll regret it for the rest of your life." "Maybe," he said, grabbing his car keys from the coffee table. "But I can't stay here. You'll get the divorce papers soon." And just like that, on an ordinary October night, with the air conditioner humming softly and the city lights flickering through the window, David Morrison walked toward the door. Rachel ran after him, desperate. "David, please. He's your son. Our son. You can't just—" "I can," he said, opening the door. "And I am. He's going to ask about you. He'll want to know where Daddy is." David paused at the threshold, his back to her. For a moment, Rachel thought he might change his mind, that his love for his son would be stronger than the fear and rejection. But when he spoke, his voice was empty of any emotion. "Tell him Daddy had to go." The door closed with a definitive sound. Rachel collapsed onto the living room floor, her sobs muffled by the hand she pressed against her mouth, so she wouldn't wake Ethan. From the boy's bedroom, she could hear the soft sound of his breathing through the baby monitor she still used, even though Ethan was already 3. That night, Rachel cried for hours. She cried for the family that had been destroyed, for the father her son would no longer have, for the man she loved who proved to be far weaker than she ever imagined. But above all, she cried for the lonely journey she knew lay ahead. When the tears finally dried and the sky began to brighten with the first rays of the Texas sunrise, Rachel made a decision. She got up from the floor, washed her face, and looked at her own reflection in the bathroom mirror. "You're going to survive this," she told herself, her voice hoarse but determined. "For him, you're going to survive." The first months after David's departure were a painful haze of basic survival. Rachel woke up every day with a weight on her chest, as if she were carrying invisible stones she could never set down. The house felt bigger, emptier, echoing with the absence that filled every room. Ethan, freshly turned 3, didn't fully understand what had happened. He asked about his father occasionally, his small voice saying "Daddy," but he would soon get distracted by his toy cars or puzzles. Rachel envied that simplicity, that ability to live in the present moment without carrying the weight of the past or the anxiety of the future. "Daddy is working far away, sweetheart," she lied, her heart tightening every time she had to repeat those words. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks after David left, delivered by a courier in the middle of a rainy afternoon. Rachel signed them with trembling hands, sitting at the kitchen table while Ethan played in the living room. With each signature, she felt as though she were confirming the end of a dream, burying for good the family she had imagined she would have. David didn't ask for visitation, didn't ask for shared custody. He offered minimal child support and disappeared completely from his son's life, as if Ethan had never existed. The shop, Rachel's creations, was financially bleeding. Rachel tried to keep the doors open, but therapy bills piled up faster than she could earn money. Insurance covered only a fraction of the treatments Ethan needed. ABA therapy sessions cost $200 each, 3 times a week. Speech therapy, another $150. Occupational therapy, just as much. Rachel did calculation after calculation in the middle of the night, her laptop lighting her tired face as silent tears slid down her cheeks without her even noticing. How was she going to manage? How could a single mother in Dallas, with a small business and a child who needed so much specialized support, survive? It was her best friend, Jennifer Wu, who saved her from drowning completely. Jennifer showed up at the shop one November morning carrying coffee and muffins from Starbucks. She found Rachel among the shelves, trying to organize products with puffy eyes from yet another sleepless night. "Rachel Morrison," Jennifer said with her strong, warm voice, placing the coffees on the counter. "You need to listen to me right now." Rachel tried to smile, but the smile died before it fully formed. "Jen, I'm okay, I'm just..." "You are not okay," Jennifer interrupted, taking her friend's hands. "And it's okay not to be okay. But you're not alone. You hear me? You're not alone." Those words were the final drop. Rachel collapsed into her friend's arms, months of pain, fear, and exhaustion spilling out in sobs she had held in for far too long. Jennifer simply held her, letting her cry, stroking her hair like an older sister. "I don't know how I'm going to do this," Rachel finally managed between sobs. "It's too much, Jen. The therapies, the shop, the bills. Ethan needs so much, and I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are the strongest person I know," Jennifer said firmly, pulling back to look her in the eyes. "You're raising a special child on your own, keeping a business open, and still getting up every single day. If that's not strength, what is? If that's not being a warrior, what is?" "It doesn't feel like I'm being strong. It feels like I'm drowning." "Then we're going to make a plan," Jennifer said, ever practical. "First, you need help. My cousin Sarah is studying special education at SMU, and she's looking for hands-on experience. She can stay with Ethan a few afternoons a week, for free. That gives you time to focus on the shop." "Jen, I can't accept." "You can and you will," Jennifer insisted. "Second, you need to change your business model. Instead of doing everything yourself, what about workshops? Teaching other people to create what you create? Charging for classes? It's less labor-intensive and can bring in consistent income. Rachel had never thought of that. The idea began to take shape in her mind, small but glowing like a candle in a dark room. And third, Jennifer continued, you need to forgive yourself. David was a coward. He failed as a father and as a man. But that is not your fault. You didn't fail. You're here, fighting, sacrificing. That is love, Rachel. That's what matters. That day, something shifted inside Rachel. It wasn't an instant transformation, nor a magical epiphany where all the pain vanished. But it was the beginning of something new. The understanding that she did not have to carry everything alone, that asking for help was not weakness, and that maybe, just maybe, she could build a new life from the ashes of the one that had been destroyed. The following months were a slow and painful reconstruction. Rachel implemented Jennifer's ideas, starting with small Saturday workshops at her shop. Learn to Create. Therapeutic Art for Moms was her first course, an idea born from her own need to find peace amid the chaos. Sarah, Jennifer's cousin, proved to be a gift from heaven. She arrived 3 afternoons a week with boundless energy and patience, playing with Ethan in ways that respected his sensory needs while gently challenging him to expand his limits. He's amazing, Rachel, Sarah often said, her eyes shining with genuine affection. Do you notice how he memorizes patterns? How he can complete a 100-piece puzzle without looking at the reference image? That's a gift. Rachel was learning to see her son through different lenses, not through the lenses of what he couldn't do, but through the lenses of his unique and astonishing abilities. Ethan might not make eye contact or understand jokes, but he had an impressive photographic memory and a brutal honesty that was both challenging and refreshing. Therapies continued 3 times a week. Rachel became an expert at navigating Dallas traffic, knowing every shortcut between Oak Cliff and the therapy center. She learned the terminology, stimuli, positive reinforcement, sensory accommodations, nonverbal communication. She became her son's best advocate, fighting for every resource, every service, every opportunity. But the nights were still hard. Nights when Ethan finally slept and Rachel allowed herself to feel the loneliness, the exhaustion, the anger that still pulsed beneath the surface when she thought of David. Where was he? What was he doing? Did he think of Ethan? Did he feel remorse? It was on one of those nights, 6 months after the abandonment, that Rachel did something she had never imagined doing. She opened her laptop, created an Instagram account, and began sharing her journey. My name is Rachel, she wrote in her first post, accompanied by a photo of her paint-stained hands creating a handcrafted frame. I am a single mother of a beautiful 4-year-old autistic boy. I was abandoned by his father when his diagnosis came, and some days I still don't know how I'll survive this. But I'm here. I'm fighting. And if you are going through something similar, know that you are not alone. She expected nothing from that post. Maybe a few likes from Jennifer and other close friends. But when she woke up the next morning, there were 40 comments. 40 women sharing their own stories of abandonment, struggle, special children, and absent parents. My ex disappeared too when we found out our daughter has Down syndrome. I've been doing this alone for 3 years with 2 autistic boys. Thank you for sharing. I feel less alone now. Rachel cried reading each comment, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of connection, of understanding that there was an entire community of warrior mothers who understood exactly what she was going through. She began posting regularly, showcasing her craft, sharing tips on handling Ethan's sensory crises, speaking honestly about the hard days. And slowly, her community grew. 50 followers, then 100, then 500. One of these followers would change the course of her entrepreneurial journey. It was May, nearly 7 months since David left. Texas was scorching, and Rachel was in her shop preparing for another workshop when she received a direct message on Instagram. Hello, Rachel. My name is Patricia Gonzalez. I own a boutique in Highland Park, and I love your work. Have you ever considered selling your pieces on a larger scale? I have several clients who would pay very well for authentic handmade art like yours. Rachel read the message 3 times, unable to believe it. Highland Park was one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Dallas. Patricia was offering an opportunity that could change everything. They met a week later at a charming cafe near SMU. Patricia was an elegant woman in her 50s, with impeccable silver hair and a warm smile that immediately put Rachel at ease. "Let me be direct," Patricia said, stirring her iced tea. "I've been following your Instagram for weeks. It's not just your work that impresses me, although it is beautiful. It's your story. It's your resilience. My clients don't just want to buy products. They want to buy meaning, purpose. And you have that in abundance." I don't know what to say," Rachel admitted, feeling her cheeks flush. "Say yes to providing exclusive pieces for my shop. I'll pay 50% above what you charge now, and you keep artist credit. This could be the start of something big, Rachel. You have talent. You have a story. You have authenticity. That's gold in today's market." Rachel drove home in shock. A real opportunity. A chance not just to survive, but to thrive. She picked up Ethan at Sarah's house and hugged him tightly in the backseat of the car. "Good things are happening, my love," she whispered into the boy's hair, even knowing he didn't fully understand. "Mommy is going to make this work. I promise." That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Rachel stayed up creating. Her hands danced over frames, fabrics, paints. Each piece carried a fragment of her journey, of her pain transformed into beauty. And for the first time in nearly a year, she felt something she had forgotten: hope. In the following months, the partnership with Patricia flourished in ways Rachel had never imagined. Her handmade pieces became coveted items among Highland Park's elite. Each frame, each arrangement, each creation carried not just aesthetic beauty, but a story of resilience that resonated deeply with her clients. Rachel had to expand. She hired 2 part-time assistants, both mothers of children with special needs, whom she had met through her growing online community. Maria, a Mexican-American mother whose son had Down syndrome, had magical hands for floral arrangements. Lisa, a former teacher who left her career to care for her daughter with cerebral palsy, had a talent for calligraphy that transformed simple phrases into works of art. Rachel's creations transformed from a struggling small shop into a vibrant space of creativity and community. The workshops became sought-after monthly events where women from all over Dallas came not just to learn crafts, but to share their stories, their struggles, their victories. Ethan, now 5, was making remarkable progress. The intensive therapies were paying off. He was still mostly nonverbal, but he had developed a picture-based communication system that worked surprisingly well. He could express his needs, preferences, even basic emotions through illustrated cards that Rachel kept in a special binder. But beyond the measurable progress, it was Ethan's personality that shone the brightest. He had a deep love for music, especially jazz, and could identify individual instruments in complex pieces. He adored textures, especially soft fabrics, and had a growing collection of blankets that he organized by color and texture. And he had a rare, devastatingly beautiful smile that lit up his entire face whenever something made him genuinely happy. Rachel documented everything on Instagram: milestones, struggles, moments of pure joy. Her account had grown to over 10,000 followers, a global community of parents, therapists, and educators who found inspiration and connection in her honest words. It was through this community that Rachel met Dr. Marcus Thompson, a nationally renowned Black behavioral therapist who had opened an innovative clinic in Dallas focusing on holistic approaches for children on the autism spectrum. Mrs. Morrison. He greeted her when she brought Ethan in for an initial consultation at his medical district clinic. "I've been following your work online. The way you document Ethan's journey with such respect and love is inspiring." "Thank you, Dr. Thompson," Rachel replied, watching Ethan carefully explore the waiting room, which had been specifically designed to be sensory-friendly. Soft lighting, neutral colors, rounded corners, and various tactile stimuli available. "I'd like to offer Ethan a place in our pilot program," Dr. Thompson said, leaning slightly to meet Rachel's eye level. "It's an approach that integrates traditional therapy with music, art, and movement, fully covered by a research grant at no cost to you." Rachel felt hot tears pressing behind her eyes. How many times in the last 2 years had she struggled with medical bills? How many nights had she stayed awake, worrying whether she could afford the next therapy sessions? "Why us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I saw in your posts something I try to teach all the parents I work with. You don't see your child as a project to fix. You see him as a unique human being, with gifts of his own to give the world. That mindset is essential for the kind of real, sustainable progress we want to achieve." That day, another door opened. Ethan began the pilot program 2 weeks later, and Rachel witnessed changes she had never thought possible. He began vocalizing more, small sounds that slowly became approximations of words. He began seeking physical contact in ways he had previously avoided, hugging Rachel briefly before bed, touching her arm when he wanted attention. But perhaps the most significant change was how Ethan began expressing himself through art. At Dr. Thompson's clinic, he discovered painting, and his creations were astounding. Explosions of color, perfect geometric patterns, compositions with an abstract beauty that even adults stop to admire. He sees the world differently than we do, Dr. Thompson explained to Rachel at a progress meeting. And through art, he is showing us that vision. It's a gift, Rachel. A rare gift. Rachel began incorporating Ethan's paintings into her handmade creations. She photographed his works, printed them in high quality, and created custom frames around them. Ethan's vision became its own line within her brand, and the response was overwhelming. People weren't just buying art, they were buying a piece of understanding, a window into the mind of an autistic child, a celebration of neurodiversity that touched hearts and changed perspectives. The income began coming in more consistently. Rachel was able to move from her small Oak Cliff home to a larger residence in Lake Highlands, with a spacious backyard where Ethan could play safely and a separate studio where she could work on her creations without interruption. She paid off all accumulated debts, established an emergency fund. For the first time in 2 years, she could breathe without the constant weight of financial worry pressing on her chest. But financial success did not fill the void that still existed. On quiet nights, after Ethan was asleep and the house was too silent, Rachel still felt the piercing loneliness of not having a partner to share the small victories and daily challenges. She didn't want another romantic relationship. Not yet, perhaps never. The wound left by David was still too raw. But she missed adult companionship, someone who understood the specific journey she was living. Jennifer continued to be her rock, visiting regularly, taking her out to occasional dinners when Sarah could watch Ethan. But Rachel knew she couldn't rely solely on a friend to fill all the empty spaces in her life. It was at one of the workshops that Rachel met Miriam Santos, a trauma-specialized psychologist who was navigating her own divorce after discovering her husband had been unfaithful for years. They connected instantly, two women rebuilding their lives from different but equally devastating betrayals. "Have you thought about therapy?" Miriam asked one afternoon as they worked side by side on a frame project. "For you, I mean, not for Ethan." Rachel paused, brush in midair. "I don't have time, or extra money for that." "I see some clients pro bono," Miriam said gently, "especially women going through situations like yours. You've been through trauma, Rachel. Abandonment is trauma, and you've been carrying it alone for so long." Rachel felt sudden tears burn her eyes. It was true. She had become so good at being strong, at focusing on Ethan, at building her business, that she had never really stopped to process her own pain. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "If I start unpacking all of this, I'm afraid I'll fall apart completely." "You won't fall apart," Miriam assured, gently placing her hand over Rachel's. "You will rebuild, the right way this time, with solid foundations." Rachel agreed. She began seeing Miriam once a week, hour-long sessions where she finally allowed herself to feel all the anger, all the pain, all the betrayal she had buried deep to keep functioning. She cried more in the first weeks of therapy than she had in the entire previous year. "You're angry," Miriam observed a session. "And it's okay to be angry. David abandoned you, abandoned your son. That's unforgivable to you, and it's understandable. But I don't want to live with anger," Rachel sobbed. "I don't want Ethan to grow up feeling this bitterness. I want peace. I want to forgive. But I don't know how to forgive something so cruel." Forgiveness isn't for him, Miriam explained gently. Forgiveness is for you. It's letting go of the weight you're carrying. It doesn't mean what he did was right. It doesn't mean you have to let him back into your lives. It simply means you choose not to let his actions define the rest of your story. Those words planted a seed in Rachel, a seed that would take time to germinate, but that would eventually grow into something transformative. 3 years had passed since David left. 3 years of absolute silence. He had kept up with the minimum child support payments through automatic transfers, but had never made contact. No calls, no birthday cards, no messages asking how Ethan was doing. For Ethan, now 6, David was just a vague figure in old photos. Daddy far away, he would say occasionally when he saw Rachel looking at wedding photos stored in a box in the closet. But he showed no sadness or sense of loss. For Ethan, his family was complete. Mommy, Sarah who visited, Jennifer who brought treats, and his growing collection of therapists and teachers that he adored. Rachel had built a good life, a full life. Her business was thriving. She had been invited to speak at women's entrepreneurship conferences, sharing her story of rebuilding a business while raising a child with special needs. She had friends, a community, a sense of purpose, and she had reached a place of peace, or something close to it. Regarding David, she no longer hated him. She felt pity, in fact. Pity for him, for missing the chance to know the extraordinary boy Ethan was becoming. But she had let go of the anger, let go of the bitterness that had once consumed her, until the phone rang that Saturday afternoon in November. Rachel was in her home studio, working on a large order for a Highland Park client, while Ethan played in the next room, lining up his cars in increasingly complex patterns. The number on the phone was unfamiliar, but had a Dallas area code. Hello, Mrs. Morrison? Mrs. Rachel Morrison. Yes, this is she. My name is Amanda Chin. I'm a nurse at Parkland Memorial Hospital. I'm calling because we have a patient, David Morrison. You are listed as his emergency contact. Rachel's heart stopped. She literally felt it skip a beat before racing uncontrollably. David, is he there? What happened? He was in a serious car accident on the Central Expressway this morning. Multiple fractures, head trauma. He's in the ICU. The situation is critical, Mrs. Morrison. We don't yet know the full extent of the damage, but he has been drifting in and out of consciousness. And when he is awake, he keeps repeating a name. Ethan, do you know anyone by that name? Rachel looked toward the room where her son was, completely unaware of the conversation that was changing everything. Instant tears filled her eyes. Ethan is his son. Our son. Oh, there was a pause on the other end. Well, the patient seems extremely agitated when conscious. He keeps calling for Ethan repeatedly. The doctors believe it would be best if he could see his son. To calm him. Every moment of agitation worsens his condition. Rachel felt like she was in a nightmare. This couldn't be happening. David, who had abandoned Ethan 3 years ago, was now dying and calling for him? Mrs. Morrison, are you there? I'm here, Rachel managed to say. I need a moment to process this. I understand, but I want you to know his condition is very serious. If you want to see him, it would be best not to wait too long. Rachel hung up the phone with trembling hands. Her knees gave way, and she had to sit on the studio floor, her head spinning with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. Part of her wanted to ignore the call. Let David face the consequences of his choices alone, just as he had left them alone. He wasn't there when Ethan had hours-long meltdowns. He wasn't there when Ethan finally spoke his first approximate word at age 4. He wasn't there for birthdays, milestones, or hard nights. Why should she be there now? But another part of her, the part that had grown over these 3 years of struggle, therapy, and learned forgiveness, whispered something different. That part remembered that forgiveness isn't about deserving, that compassion isn't conditional, that the kind of person she wanted to be, the kind of example she wanted to set for Ethan, was not someone who lets another human being die alone, no matter what they had done. She called Miriam, desperate for guidance. Rachel, breathe, Miriam said after hearing the whole story. What is your heart telling you? My heart is split in two, Rachel admitted, tears now streaming freely. One half wants to let him rot. The other half knows that, I'll never forgive myself if I don't go. And more than that, I think about Ethan. When he's older, when he understands more. What will I say when he asks about his father? Will I tell him I let him die alone? Only you can make that decision, Miriam said gently. But I'll tell you this. You've spent 3 years healing, working on forgiveness. This is a test, Rachel. A test of everything you've built. Not for him, for you. Rachel hung up and sat in silence for long minutes. Finally, she stood, washed her face, and went to the room where Ethan was playing. Ethan, my love, she said, kneeling beside him. He didn't look at her, focused on his cars, but she knew he was listening. Mommy needs to go somewhere. A hospital. Remember Daddy? The pictures. Ethan paused, his fingers still on a red car. Daddy, he said softly, the word imperfect but recognizable. That's right, Daddy. He's sick. He's asking for you. Rachel didn't know how much Ethan would understand, but she had learned never to underestimate her son. He processed the world differently, but he did process it. Do you want to see Daddy? She asked, her voice trembling. To her surprise, Ethan looked up, not directly into her eyes, but close enough, and he nodded, a small but definite movement. Rachel grabbed the phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and called the hospital back. Hello, this is Rachel Morrison. Aya, we're coming. Ethan and I are on our way. Parkland Memorial Hospital was located in Dallas Medical District, a massive complex of medical buildings that Rachel knew well from Ethan's countless appointments over the years. But this time, as she drove down Harry Hines Boulevard, her stomach was twisting in a way that had nothing to do with navigation. Ethan was silent in the back seat, his hands rhythmically touching the texture of his favorite blanket that Rachel had brought to keep him calm. She watched him through the rearview mirror, her heart breaking at his innocence, at the way he trusted her completely to guide him through situations he didn't fully understand. The parking lot was crowded, as always. Rachel found a distant spot and spent several minutes preparing Ethan for the hospital environment. They had practiced this before medical visits. The loud sounds, the bright lights, the strange smells. She placed his noise-canceling headphones on him, checked that he had his communication cards in his backpack, and took a deep breath. It's okay, my love. Mommy's here. Always. The ICU reception was a sterile, cold space, painted that hospital green that was supposedly calming, but that Rachel had always found depressing. Nurse Amanda Chin was waiting for them, a petite Asian-American woman with gentle, tired eyes that revealed many sleepless nights on duty. Mrs. Morrison, she greeted, then looked at Ethan with a soft smile. And you must be Ethan. Your daddy has been asking a lot for you. Rachel felt her jaw tighten at those words. His daddy, the man who had denied this fatherhood, who had turned his back when things got hard, was now reclaiming the title? How is he? Rachel asked, her voice colder than intended. Amanda's expression turned serious. Not good. He has multiple rib fractures, a broken femur. But the biggest issue is the head trauma. There's swelling in the brain. The next few days will determine, well, if he survives. And if he does, what kind of permanent damage there might be. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, grappling with the contradictory emotions tearing at her chest. She didn't want to feel compassion for David. She didn't want her heart to ache for his pain. But it did. Against her will, against her anger, it did. There's something you need to know, Amanda continued, her voice lowering. He's different. The agitation, the calling for Ethan, there's something almost desperate about it. The doctors suspect the head trauma may have affected his cognitive functions. He seems confused about time and place. So be prepared. Rachel squeezed Ethan's hand, seeking strength from her son's touch. Ethan squeezed back, one of the few forms of physical contact he initiated voluntarily. The ICU room was exactly as Rachel imagined it would be. Machines beeping, tubes everywhere, that characteristic smell of disinfectant and illness. And in the bed, unrecognizable at first glance, was David. Rachel stifled a scream. She hadn't seen this man in 3 years, but this broken, swollen figure in the hospital bed seemed like a stranger. His face was covered in bruises, purples and greens blending into sickly tones. Bandages wrapped around his head, tubes coming out of his mouth and nose. One leg was suspended in a complicated traction system. For a moment, she thought he was asleep, but then his eyes opened, empty and unfocused, searching for something he couldn't find. "Ethan," he murmured through the tube, his voice hoarse and broken. "I need Ethan." Rachel felt Ethan press his legs against her own, the boy partially hiding behind her. This was a normal response for him in new and frightening situations. She knelt beside him, getting down to his eye level. "Ethan, that's your daddy," she said softly, pointing toward the bed. "He's very sick, but he wants to see you. Can you be brave and say hi?" Ethan looked at the bed, his eyes processing the scene in his unique way. Rachel saw the moment recognition clicked, a small furrow of the brow, a tilt of the head. He had seen enough photos of David to recognize some features, even through the injuries. Slowly, so slowly, Ethan let go of Rachel's hand and took 2 steps toward the bed. He pulled a communication card from his backpack, the one with a simple drawing of 2 figures and the word hello written below. "Hello," Ethan said, his voice soft and monotone but clear. He held up the card so David could see. David's eyes focused. Rachel saw the moment he truly saw Ethan, saw his son for the first time in 3 years. Tears began streaming down his battered face, mixing with the tubes and bandages. "Ethan," he whispered, the word heavy with so much pain that even Rachel, holding all her stored anger, felt her heart tighten. My boy. You came." "He came," Rachel said, her voice firm but not cruel. She stepped closer, standing beside Ethan, a protective hand on her son's shoulder. "We came." David's eyes moved to Rachel, and she saw in them something she had never seen before. Absolute shame. Not just regret, but deep, destructive shame. "Rachel," he tried to speak, but his voice failed. He tried again. I'm so sorry." "No," Rachel interrupted, her voice breaking despite her efforts to keep it steady. "You can't say that now. Not like this. Not when you're dying and need absolution. You had 3 years, David. 3 years." "I know," he whispered, more tears falling. "I know. I was the coward. A monster. I left you. Left my son." Ethan watched everything with his unique focus. Rachel knew he didn't fully understand the words, but he understood emotion. He could feel the heavy pain in the air, see the tears, sense the tension. And then, Ethan did something Rachel never expected. He stepped closer to the bed and reached out, gently touching David's arm that wasn't connected to any tubes. It was a brief touch, only a few seconds, but it was intentional. It was connection. "Sit, Daddy," Ethan said, and pulled another card, this one with a heart drawn on it. David sobbed, a guttural, broken sound that made the machines around him beep in protest. Amanda Chin quickly stepped forward, checking the monitors, her expression worried. "He needs to calm down," she said. "The agitation is raising his intracranial pressure." "David," Rachel said, forcing herself to speak calmly. "You need to calm down. Breathe. We're here. Ethan is here. You saw us. Now you need to rest." "Don't go away," David pleaded, his desperate eyes moving from Rachel to Ethan and back. "Please, not again." Rachel looked at Amanda, who nodded slightly. She understood what was left unsaid. David was afraid. Afraid that if they left now, he would never see them again. That he would die alone, with the weight of his abandonment being the last thing he felt. "We're staying," Rachel heard herself say, the words coming out before she could fully think them through. "For a while. We're staying." David closed his eyes, and for the first time since they entered the room, his breathing steadied. The monitors began to show more stable numbers. Ethan returned to Rachel's side, leaning against her leg, exhausted from the sensory stress of the hospital environment. Rachel grabbed a chair and sat down, pulling Ethan into her lap. She looked at the man in the bed, the man she had loved, who betrayed her, who abandoned their son, and she felt something shift inside her, something release that she hadn't even realized she had been holding so tightly. She didn't yet know if it was forgiveness, but it was something, a beginning of something. The hours in the ICU dragged like molasses. Rachel had called Jennifer, who immediately offered to bring food and comfort items for Ethan. Sarah also came, bringing some of Ethan's favorite toys, and his therapy backpack with activities that could keep him occupied and regulated. "You don't have to do this," Jennifer whispered to Rachel while Ethan was distracted with a puzzle Sarah had brought. They were in the ICU waiting room, a depressingly decorated space with old magazines and vending machines. "He doesn't deserve you here." "I know," Rachel replied, exhaustion heavy in her voice. "But I'm not doing this for him, Jen. I'm doing it for me. And for Ethan. I don't want my son growing up knowing that I let his father die alone, no matter what he did." "You're a better person than I would be," Jennifer said, hugging her friend. The nurses allowed Rachel to stay beyond normal visiting hours, making an exception due to the severity of David's condition and the obvious calming effect Ethan's presence had on him. They set up a small space in the corner of the room where Ethan could play, shielded from the worst of the medical stimuli by a portable screen. David drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he woke agitated, searching for Ethan with wild, frightened eyes until Rachel gently reminded him they were there. Other times, he woke calmer, his eyes fixed on Ethan with an intensity that blended love and regret so deep it was physically palpable. On the second night, as Ethan finally slept on an improvised mat provided by the nurses, covered with his favorite blanket, David woke more lucid than he had been since the accident. "Rachel," he called, his voice still weak but clearer. She approached the bed, maintaining a respectful but present distance. "I'm here." "Why did you come?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "After everything, why?" Rachel remained silent for a long moment, considering the question. Why had she come? Was it just for Ethan? Was it for some remnant of love she still carried for the man David had once been? Or was it something bigger, something about who she had become? "Because I spent 3 years learning to forgive," she finally said, her voice low, so as not to wake Ethan. "Not in the way you might think. Not forgiving your actions or saying it was all right, but forgiving so I could move forward, so I wouldn't be trapped in anger and bitterness." "You should be," David said, tears filling his eyes again. "Angry, bitter. I abandoned you, abandoned our son when he needed me most." "I know," Rachel replied, a firmness in her voice that carried no cruelty, only truth. "Believe me, I know. Every night I stayed awake alone, worrying if I could pay the bills. Every milestone Ethan reached without you there. Every time he asked about you in those early months. I know exactly what you did." David closed his eyes, the pain in his face unrelated to his physical injuries. "Then tell me," Rachel continued, sitting in the chair next to the bed. "Why did you leave? Really? Not the excuses you gave me that night. The truth." David stayed silent, so long Rachel thought he had fallen asleep again. But then he began to speak, his voice broken and heavy with shame. "I was terrified," he admitted. "When the diagnosis came, all I could see were limitations, problems, a life that would always be hard, and I couldn't handle it. My father was hard on me my whole life, always demanding perfection. I spent my entire life trying to be perfect, get the perfect career, the perfect family. And when he didn't fit that picture, I panicked." "So you ran," Rachel said, not as a question but as a statement. "I ran," David confirmed, heavy shame in every word. "I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that you'd be better off without me. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was protecting myself, my ego, my image of how my life should be. And in the process, I destroyed everything that really mattered." Rachel felt hot tears in her eyes. They weren't tears of easy forgiveness or forgetting. They were tears for the tragedy of it all, for the time lost, for the pain that could have been avoided if David had only been brave enough to stay. "Do you know what was the hardest part?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "It wasn't the money. It wasn't the exhaustion. It was explaining to our son why his father didn't love him enough to stay." "But I did love," David sobbed. I always loved. I just didn't know how to show it. Didn't know how to be the father he needed. And instead of learning, I ran." "And now," Rachel asked, wiping her own tears, "now that you're here, broken and dying, do you have clarity? Do you understand?" "The heartbeat," David said, his breathing becoming more labored with emotion. When the car hit me, when everything went dark, all I could think about was him. His face. How I would never see him again. How I wasted 3 years I could have spent getting to know my son. And I realized the fear I felt when he was diagnosed was nothing compared to the terror of dying knowing I abandoned him. Rachel looked at Ethan sleeping peacefully in the corner of the room, his small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Her beautiful boy, who despite everything, despite the father who rejected him, was growing, developing, and becoming an incredible person in his own unique way. "You've lost so much, David," she said softly. "You missed hearing him say his first approximated word. You missed when he painted his first artwork. You missed when he started seeking hugs. You missed everything because you were afraid of something that wasn't nearly as scary as you imagined." "I know," David whispered, "and I would give everything I have to go back in time, to do it differently, to stay." Rachel took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside her. She had carried so much weight for so long. Anger, resentment, the need to protect Ethan from his father's rejection. But looking at David now, broken and repentant and possibly dying, she felt those weights beginning to lift. "You can't go back in time," she said, her voice now gentler. "None of us can. But if you survive this, if the doctors can save you, you can do things differently from now on." David's eyes widened, a spark of hope lighting them. You would let me meet him? Even after everything?" Rachel looked at Ethan again, carefully considering her next words. "I'm not promising anything now, David. You caused a lot of pain. And Ethan, he doesn't know you. You're a stranger to him. If, and I say if, you survive and prove that you've truly changed, that you won't abandon him again when things get hard, then maybe we can talk about it." "I will prove it," David said with an intensity that made the machines around him beat faster. "I swear, Rachel, if I survive, I'll dedicate every remaining day of my life to making it up, to being the father he deserves, the father I should have always been." "Words are easy in a hospital bed," Rachel said, not cruelly. "Actions are what matter." "Then give me the chance to act," David pleaded. "Please, give me the chance to be his father, to know him, to love him the way he deserves to be loved." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She rose and went to where Ethan slept, kneeling beside him, watching his peaceful face in the dim hospital room. Her son, her reason to keep going, the miracle who had taught her more about unconditional love than anything else in life. "What do you think, my love?" she whispered to the sleeping Ethan, knowing he couldn't hear her, but needing to speak anyway. "Is Mommy doing the right thing? Should we give him a chance?" As if sensing her presence, Ethan stirred in his sleep, his small hand reaching out and finding Rachel's. He held it, even asleep, and Rachel felt tears fall once again. She thought of everything Miriam had taught her in therapy, about forgiveness, about compassion, about breaking cycles of pain. She thought about the kind of person she wanted to be, the examples she wanted to set for Ethan about how to treat people who hurt us. And she made a decision that would change everything. The next few days were an emotional roller coaster, filled with medical uncertainties. David's condition fluctuated dangerously. One day he seemed to be improving, the doctors cautiously optimistic about his recovery. The next day, he would develop an infection or his brain would show signs of increased swelling, and everyone held their breath again. Rachel established a strange and surreal routine. In the mornings, she took Ethan to his scheduled therapies, keeping his routine as normal as possible. Sarah continued to help, picking up Ethan when necessary. After therapy, Rachel would stop by the hospital with Ethan for brief visits. She noticed something remarkable happening during these visits. Ethan, who was usually hesitant around strangers, was developing a cautious curiosity about David. He brought his communication cards, showed his drawings, and even approached the bed to observe the machines and tubes with his meticulous attention to detail. "Sick daddy," Ethan would say frequently, and he began bringing comfort items from home. One of his favorite blankets, not the main one, but a secondary one he could lend. Some of his picture books. David cried every time Ethan made these small gestures. Silent tears ran down his still bruised face, his gaze fixed on the child he was truly meeting for the first time. He is amazing, David whispered to Rachel one afternoon while Ethan was on the other side of the room, focused on lining up the small cars he had brought from home. I didn't know he would be so special. He has always been special, Rachel replied, a tinge of irritation coloring her voice. You just didn't stay long enough to find out. I know, David said, accepting the reprimand. Tell me about him. Who he is, what he likes. I've missed so much. I want to know everything. And then Rachel found herself doing something she never imagined, sharing her son with the man who abandoned him. She told David about Ethan's love for jazz, about how he could identify individual instruments in complex pieces, about his paintings, about the unique way he saw patterns and colors, about his progress in therapy, the words he was beginning to use, the hugs he sometimes initiated. He has an incredible therapist in Dr. Thompson's program, Rachel explained. She works with music and movement, and Ethan flourishes there. He's not nonverbal, not exactly. He chooses when to speak, and he's learning to communicate in so many other ways. Dr. Thompson? David asked. Marcus Thompson? You know him? I know of him, David said. Or rather, I know his reputation. He's one of the best in the country for autism therapies. How did you get him into his program? He found me, Rachel said, a small smile touching her lips for the first time in days. Through Instagram, I started documenting our journey, and he was impressed with how I saw Ethan. He offered me a full scholarship. Instagram. David looked confused. You're on social media? I have over 10,000 followers, Rachel said, not without a touch of pride. Moms, dads, therapists, educators. A whole community of people who understand what it's like to raise special children. David looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. You've changed so much. You're so strong. I had to be strong, Rachel replied, her voice carrying the weight of those 3 years. There was no other choice. When you left, I could either collapse or rise. I chose to rise. For him. And the shop? David asked. Rachel's creation still exists. Not only does it exist, it's thriving, Rachel said. We've expanded. I have 2 assistants now, both mothers of special children. We hold monthly workshops. I have partnerships with boutiques in Highland Park. And we started a line using Ethan's paintings, Ethan's vision. It's doing incredibly well. David closed his eyes, more tears escaping. You did all this alone. While you were where exactly? Rachel asked, the question she had carried for 3 years, finally coming out. What did you do these 3 years, David? Where were you? David opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling. I moved to Austin right after I left. I got a job there, convincing myself I was starting over. But I wasn't starting over. I was running away. Again. Did you meet anyone? Rachel asked, not wanting to know, but needing to know. I tried, David admitted. I went out with a few people. Nothing serious. How could it be? I was carrying so much weight, so much guilt. I drank too much, worked too much, did anything to avoid thinking about you. But it didn't work. You were there, in my mind, every night. Ethan especially. I dreamed about him constantly. But you never called, never visited, never even sent a birthday card. I was ashamed, David said, his voice broken. More ashamed with each passing day. How could I call after weeks? After months? After a year? How would I explain where I'd been? Why I abandoned you? The shame turned into paralysis, and the paralysis turned into 3 lost years. Rachel felt a complex emotion arising. It wasn't full forgiveness, not yet, but it was understanding. She understood shame, understood how it could paralyze, how it could make you dig deeper instead of climbing out of the hole. And now, she asked, if you survive this, what happens now? Now I do differently, David said with conviction. If the doctors save me, if I get a second chance, I won't waste it. I learn about autism, learn about Ethan, become the father he deserves, even if it's late, even if I have to spend the rest of my life making up for lost time. Autism is not something to make up for, Rachel corrected gently but firmly. It's not a tragedy or a problem. It's just a different way of being in the world. Ethan doesn't need to be fixed, David. He needs to be accepted, supported, loved exactly as he is. Then teach me, David pleaded. Teach me how to do that. How to be the father of an autistic child. How to love him the right way. Rachel looked at Ethan, who was now showing David one of his favorite books, pointing to the figures even though David could barely focus on them. It's not about being the father of an autistic child, Rachel said softly. It's about being Ethan's father, knowing his specific needs, his likes, his limits. He is not a diagnosis, David. He is a person, an incredible, funny, smart, loving person in his own way. And if you want to be part of his life, you need to see him, not the autism. Him. I see, David whispered, watching Ethan. For the first time, I really see. A week after the accident, the doctors finally had news. Dr. Patel, the chief neurosurgeon, met Rachel in the hallway outside David's room. He was a tall Indian man with gray hair and an expression that had seen much pain, but still held compassion. Mrs. Morrison, he began, and Rachel immediately felt her stomach tighten. His tone promised nothing good. Will he survive? She asked directly, without beating around the bush. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. We believe so. The brain swelling is decreasing, and he's responding well to treatment for the infections. Physically, he'll need months of recovery and physical therapy, but he should eventually regain full mobility. But, Rachel asked, hearing the unspoken but in his voice. But there are complications, Dr. Patel continued. The traumatic brain injury caused some permanent damage. Nothing that will prevent him from living a relatively normal life, but there will be challenges. His short-term memory is compromised. He will have difficulties with executive planning and organization. He may experience personality changes and struggles with emotional regulation. Rachel processed the information, the irony not lost on her. David, who had abandoned his child because of his neurological differences, would now have to navigate his own cognitive differences. Basically, she said slowly, he's going to need the same kind of support and patience that Ethan needs. In a way, yes, Dr. Patel confirmed. He will need therapy, structure, and support. It will be a long rehabilitation journey. And does he know that? We informed him. He is processing it. Rachel thanked the doctor and returned to the room. David was awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression she couldn't read. Ethan was with Jennifer in the waiting room, giving Rachel a moment of privacy. You heard? David asked without looking at her. I heard, Rachel confirmed, pulling the chair beside the bed. I'm going to have cognitive problems, David said, his voice flat. Ironic, isn't it? I abandoned my son because his brain works differently, and now my brain is going to work differently too. It's not exactly the same thing, Rachel said. No, but it's close enough, David replied. He finally looked at her, and there was something in his eyes she had never seen before. Genuine humility. Maybe it's justice. Maybe the universe is forcing me to understand what Ethan goes through, what you went through raising him alone. It's not about justice or karma, Rachel said softly. It's about life. Things happen. Some people are born with brains that work differently. Some people suffer accidents that change their brains. None of that defines a person's worth. David was silent for a long moment. I'm going to need help, he finally said. A lot of help. The doctor said I'll need to live with someone during the initial recovery, that I can't be alone for months. You don't have family in Dallas? Rachel asked, though she already knew the answer. David's parents had moved to Florida years ago, and he had no close relationship with them anyway. No, David confirmed. I have no one. I burned all the bridges, pushed everyone away. Rachel knew what he was implicitly asking, and she knew that her answer would define the course of everything that followed. She could say no, leave him to fend for himself, and be completely justified. He had abandoned her, abandoned Ethan, didn't deserve her help. But then she thought about everything she had learned over these 3 years, about forgiveness, about compassion, about breaking cycles of pain rather than perpetuating them. She thought about what she would tell Ethan years from now when he asked about this moment. And she thought about the person she wanted to be, the legacy of love and strength she wanted to leave her son. "You can stay in the guest room," she heard herself say, the words coming out before she could fully question them. "Temporarily, just during the initial recovery." David's eyes widened in shock. "Rachel, you don't have to." "I know I don't," she interrupted. "And to be clear, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Ethan, because he deserves a chance to know his father, if that father is genuinely willing to show up this time. And I'm doing it for me, because I don't want to be the kind of person who turns their back on someone in need, even if that person turned their back on me." "I won't let you down," David said, tears streaming. "Not this time. I swear." "We'll see," Rachel said, her voice firm. "But I need you to understand. This is an opportunity. A single opportunity. If you hurt us again, if you abandon Ethan again, there won't be a third chance. Do you understand?" "I understand," David said solemnly. "And thank you. Even if you don't believe me yet, thank you for this chance." Rachel nodded and stood to go get Ethan from the waiting room. As she left the room, she glanced back one last time, seeing David lying in the hospital bed, broken but perhaps, just perhaps, beginning to rebuild into something better. She didn't yet know if she was doing the right thing, but she knew she was doing the compassionate thing. And for now, that would have to be enough. 3 weeks after the accident, David was discharged from Parkland Memorial Hospital. Rachel drove in silence along the Central Expressway, the same stretch where the accident had occurred, while David rode in the passenger seat, still fragile and covered in bandages. Ethan was in the back seat, watching the world pass by the window with his calm, focused attention. The house in Lake Highlands felt different with David there. Smaller, somehow, as if the space Rachel and Ethan had carefully built over the past 3 years was being invaded by a presence that no longer belonged. Rachel had prepared the guest room sparsely. A bed, a dresser, a chair. Nothing personal, nothing permanent. "This is your room," she said, her voice polite but distant as she guided David slowly down the hallway. He was still using a cane, his recently out-of-traction leg fractured, his head still wrapped in light bandages. "Bathroom is shared down the hall. I've prepared a list of rules on the dresser." David looked at her, something between gratitude and shame in his eyes. "Rules, rules," Rachel confirmed firmly. "First, Ethan comes first. Always. If something you do upsets or dysregulates him, you adjust your behavior, not his. Second, you don't make decisions about his routine, therapies, or care without discussing them with me first. Third, you participate in his recovery. If you stay here, you learn about autism. You attend appointments when invited. You become an active part of his journey." "I want that," David said quickly. "I want to learn. I want to be involved." "We'll see," Rachel said, those 2 words becoming almost a mantra. "Fourth rule, you take care of your own recovery. I'm not your nurse. You have physical therapy 3 times a week, occupational therapy twice, and sessions with a neuropsychologist. You will attend all of them. No exceptions." "I will," David agreed, accepting the firmness in her voice. He knew he didn't deserve kindness, not yet. "And 5th rule," Rachel continued, her voice growing even firmer. "At the first sign that you want to give up again, that it's getting too hard, you tell me immediately and you leave. I will not let Ethan get attached to you only for you to abandon him again. Do you understand?" "I understand," David said solemnly. "And Rachel, I won't give up. Not this time. I promise." "Promises are easy," Rachel replied, echoing what she had said at the hospital. "Show me with actions." The first days were strangely tense. David spent most of his time in his room, only leaving for silent meals and therapy sessions that Rachel or Jennifer took him to. He watched Ethan from afar, clearly wanting to connect but not knowing how. Ethan, for his part, was confused by David's sudden presence. He circled around the man with cautious curiosity, occasionally bringing a toy to show him, but quickly backing away if David made any abrupt movements or spoke too loudly. "You need to go slower," Rachel instructed one night after Ethan had withdrawn from a clumsy attempt by David to play with him. "He needs time to process. Don't force intimacy. Let him come to you." How do I do that? David asked, genuine frustration in his voice. How do I connect with him when he barely looks at me? You learn his language, Rachel explained, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She gestured for David to sit as well. Ethan communicates, just not in the way you're used to. He shows interest by staying in the same space as you, even if he doesn't make direct contact. He shares by bringing his toys closer. He trusts when he allows you to exist in his routine without resistance. I don't understand any of this, David admitted, running his hands through his hair in frustration. The motion made him wince in pain, a reminder of his still tender injuries. Then you learn, Rachel said simply. I'll lend you some books, and you'll start attending Dr. Thompson's appointments. He'll explain better than I can. You would let me go to the appointments? David asked, surprised. I said I'd give you a chance, Rachel replied. That means real access to his world. But you go as an observer first, not as a decision maker. Do you understand the difference? David nodded, something like hope flickering in his eyes. Ethan's first therapy session with David present was a revelation for him. Dr. Marcus Thompson had designed his clinic masterfully. The walls were painted in soft shades of blue and green, the lighting adjustable to accommodate sensory sensitivities, and there were multiple activity stations that allowed children to explore at their own pace. Mr. Morrison, Dr. Thompson greeted David with a firm but gentle handshake. Rachel has told me about your situation. Welcome. Thank you for letting me come, David said, sincerity heavy in his voice. It's not about letting you come, Dr. Thompson corrected gently. It's about Ethan, and Rachel decided your presence could be beneficial, so let's make it count. David watched, fascinated, as Ethan's therapist, a young woman named Keisha, with a warm smile and infinite patience, worked with the boy. She didn't force eye contact. She didn't insist on verbal responses. Instead, she followed Ethan's interests, gently expanding his interactions through music, movement, and play based on his preferences. Ethan was working on a complex puzzle, his hands moving with surprising precision. Keisha sat beside him, not interfering, just observing and occasionally commenting on colors or shapes. Do you see how she doesn't interrupt him? Dr. Thompson explained quietly to David, who was observing through a one-way glass window. Rachel stood beside them. She respects his focus, his concentration. When he finishes a section, she offers a choice. Do you want to continue with the puzzle or explore the music station? Choices are important. Autonomy is key. But how does she teach new things if she only follows what he already likes? David asked, genuinely confused. She doesn't just follow, Dr. Thompson corrected. She expands. Watch now. Ethan had finished the puzzle and was stimming, gently rocking back and forth, his hands making repetitive motions in the air. David started to move as if to intervene, but Rachel placed a hand on his arm. Wait, she whispered. Keisha began to sing softly, a simple melody matching Ethan's rocking rhythm. Gradually, she introduced words describing what he was doing, rocking back and forth. Slowly, Ethan began to synchronize his rocking with her music, and then, surprisingly, he started vocalizing along, sounds approximating her words. This is incredible, David whispered, tears involuntarily filling his eyes. He's singing. He's regulating through movement, and she's turning that into a language opportunity, Dr. Thompson explained. This is quality therapy, not forcing compliance. It's finding where the child is and building a bridge from there. David watched the entire session in awe. He saw Ethan paint, noticed how his color choices were not random, but followed complex patterns he clearly saw in his mind. He saw how Ethan communicated through gestures, sounds, picture cards, and occasional approximated words. He saw the brilliant intelligence in his son that he had been too blind to recognize 3 years ago. When the session ended, Ethan left the therapy room and immediately went to Rachel, pressing his head briefly against her leg before stepping back, his way of seeking comfort after the hard work of therapy. Good job, my love, Rachel said softly, gently stroking his hair briefly before he stepped away. She knew exactly how long of a touch he could tolerate before becoming overwhelmed. David watched the interaction with something akin to envy. He wanted that connection, that intuitive understanding Rachel had with Ethan. But he knew it couldn't be forced, couldn't be rushed. "Dr. Thompson," David said as they prepared to leave, Is there something I can do? Some way to learn faster? To connect with him?" Dr. Thompson considered the question carefully. "There's a parent support group I facilitate here at the clinic. Wednesdays at 7 in the evening. Parents at various stages of the autism journey, sharing experiences, challenges, victories. It might be helpful for you." "Can I go?" David asked, looking to Rachel for permission. Rachel hesitated. That group had been her sanctuary, her safe space to process her own struggles. The idea of David there, intruding into that space as well, made her stomach tighten. But she looked at the genuine expression on his face, the real desire to learn, and something in her softened slightly. "You can go," she finally said. "But you go as a learner. You listen more than you speak, especially at first. These people have been through a lot. They deserve respect." "I'll just listen," David promised, "and learn." That Wednesday, David attended his first support group. The room was arranged in a circle, about 12 people from diverse backgrounds. There were mothers and fathers, grandparents, even an older adult sibling, each carrying their own stories, their own struggles. Rachel was there, sitting across the circle from David, keeping intentional distance. She briefly waved to other people she knew, women she had built connections with over the years. Dr. Thompson began the session in his warm, welcoming manner. "We have some new faces today. Would anyone like to introduce themselves?" A young woman, no older than 25, timidly raised her hand. "I'm Maria. My daughter Sophia was diagnosed 3 months ago. She's 4 years old. I'm still trying to understand everything." There were sympathetic murmurs around the circle. Everyone remembered those first months, the shock, the confusion, the fear. "And her father?" someone asked gently. Maria looked down, tears filling her eyes. He said he couldn't handle it. Left us last week." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with painful understanding. Several people in the circle nodded, recognizing the story. Rachel felt her heart tighten, remembering how she had felt when she was in Maria's place. Then David spoke, his voice low but clear. "I was that guy." All eyes turned to him. Rachel felt her whole body tense. "My name is David," he continued, forcing himself to maintain eye contact even though it was difficult. "When my son Ethan was diagnosed 3 years ago, I ran. I abandoned him and my wife. Because I was scared, because I was cowardly, because I couldn't handle the idea that my son wasn't perfect." The room fell completely silent, everyone processing this brutal confession. "And now," David continued, his voice breaking, "now I'm here trying to learn how to be the father I should have been from the start, trying to make up for 3 years I will never get back. So, Maria, I can't say anything that will make the pain go away. But I can say this, your daughter has you. And you fighting for her, learning for her, staying when it's hard. That's all she needs." Maria was openly crying now, as were several others in the circle. Rachel felt her own tears, hot and unexpected, running down her face. She hadn't expected this from David, hadn't expected this raw honesty, this public vulnerability. Dr. Thompson let the silence linger a moment before speaking. "Thank you for sharing that, David. It takes courage to admit our mistakes, especially the ones that caused so much harm." The session continued, with others sharing their stories. One father spoke about the grief he felt when the diagnosis came, grieving the child he had imagined. A grandmother spoke about her journey to understand and accept her grandson. An older sibling spoke about growing up with an autistic sister and how that shaped who he became. When the session ended, several people approached David. To Rachel's surprise, they were not hostile. Some offered encouragement. Others offered resources, books, tips. "It's hard at first," one father said, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "But you learn, and your child will teach you more than any book can." Rachel watched from afar, conflicted feelings swirling inside her. Part of her was still angry, still wanted to protect her territory, the space she had built without David. But another part, the part that had grown through forgiveness and compassion, recognized that David was genuinely trying. And perhaps, just perhaps, he deserved this chance. On the drive home, they drove in silence for several minutes before David spoke. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Rachel asked, eyes fixed on the road. "For letting me go. For letting me be part of that. I know that was your space." "It's still my space," Rachel said, but her voice was softer than the words. "But you did well today. You were honest. That matters." "I have a lot to make up for," David said. "Yes, you do," Rachel agreed. "But maybe you're starting." The following weeks brought a gradual shift in the household dynamic. David was committed to his own therapies, working hard to regain mobility and relearn cognitive skills affected by the traumatic brain injury. Rachel watched, initially skeptical, then with growing respect, as he faced his own challenges with determination. Ironically, it was through his own struggles that David began to connect with Ethan. One afternoon, David was in the living room doing his occupational therapy exercises, working on a complex puzzle his therapist had prescribed to help with his spatial cognition. He was frustrated, struggling with something that would have been easy before the accident. Ethan was in the same space, as he often was now, playing with his own puzzles on the floor. He watched David struggle for several minutes, his head tilted in that particular way that meant he was processing something. Then, surprisingly, Ethan got up and approached David. He picked up a puzzle piece that David had been trying to fit and, without a word, placed it in the correct spot. Then he returned to his own puzzle, as if nothing special had happened. David froze, staring at the now perfectly placed piece, then at Ethan, then back at the piece. Tears welled in his eyes. "Thank you, son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan didn't respond verbally, didn't look up, but there was the slightest nod, a recognition of the gratitude. Rachel had witnessed everything from the kitchen doorway, where she was preparing dinner. She felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been tight for far too long. That small moment, that tiny connection between father and son, was exactly the kind of quiet miracle she had stopped believing could happen. David began seeking more opportunities to be present in Ethan's life, but in ways that respected the boy's needs. He learned that Ethan loved when someone read to him, even if he didn't make eye contact during reading. So David started a nightly routine of reading to Ethan before bed, sitting on the floor of the boy's room with a book, his voice softly narrating stories, while Ethan lined up his cars or arranged his blankets. "You don't have to look at me," David said gently. "I'll just read, and you can do whatever you want while you listen." At first, it seemed as though Ethan was completely ignoring the readings, but Rachel noticed small signs. Ethan would become calmer during the stories, his movements slower and more deliberate. One night, when David accidentally skipped a page, Ethan made a protesting sound, proving that he wasn't just listening but had memorized the sequence of the story. "You were paying attention," David said, admiration in his voice. "You're incredible, you know that?" Ethan didn't respond, but there was the faintest ghost of a smile on his lips. David also began attending Rachel's workshops at her shop. He didn't directly help with the crafting at first, still recovering from limited mobility, but he was present, observing, learning. He watched how Rachel interacted with her clients, especially those who were mothers of special needs children. He listened to the stories they shared, stories of struggle and triumph, impossible days, and small victories. "You've built something incredible here," David said to Rachel one evening after a particularly busy workshop. They were tidying the shop, stacking chairs and cleaning tables. "It's not just a business. It's a community." "That was the intention," Rachel said, sweeping scraps of fabric and paper. "When everything fell apart, when you left, I needed community. I needed to know I wasn't alone. So I created a space where other women could find that too." "I stole that from you," David said quietly. "The chance to have a partner building this with you. The chance to have support from the beginning." Rachel stopped sweeping and looked at him. "Yes, you stole it, but I built it anyway. I didn't need you to do it." The words weren't cruel, just honest, and David accepted them with a nod. "I know, and that makes you even more incredible." It was on one of these nights, about 2 months after David had moved into the house, that something shifted between them. It wasn't dramatic, not a movie moment. It was small, almost imperceptible. They were in the kitchen together, Rachel preparing Ethan's lunch for the next day, while David washed the dinner dishes. They worked in comfortable silence, a routine that had developed naturally over the weeks. "Ethan hugged me today," David said suddenly, his voice full of wonder. Rachel paused what she was doing. "Hugged? Well, sort of. He leaned on me, pressed his shoulder against mine for maybe 3 seconds. But for him, I know that's huge." Rachel felt sudden tears sting her eyes. Hugs were rare from Ethan, precious gifts he gave only when he felt completely safe and connected. That's big, David," she admitted. "He's trusting you." "I won't break that trust," David said, turning to face her. "I swear, Rachel, never again." Rachel looked at him, really looked. She saw a man different from the one who had left 3 years ago. This man had scars, physical and emotional. This man had been broken and was working every day to rebuild. This man was learning, growing, genuinely trying. "I'm starting to believe in you," she said softly, seeing hope light up his eyes. "Really?" he asked, almost afraid to believe it. "Starting," she emphasized. "You still have a long way to go. But you're showing it. With actions, not just words." David nodded, accepting that, knowing it was the most he could hope for now. Not all progress was linear. There were hard days, days when Ethan had meltdowns that lasted for hours and nothing seemed to help. Days when David felt crushed by the enormity of what he had lost and how much he had to make up for. Days when Rachel wondered if she had made the right choice, letting him back into their lives. One of these storms came on a December afternoon. Dallas weather had shifted suddenly. A cold front bringing strong winds and heavy rain that drummed against the windows. Ethan hated storms. The unpredictable sound of thunder, the shift in air pressure, the flickering lights. Everything combined to throw him completely off balance. Rachel was at the shop when the storm started, stuck finishing an urgent order. David was home with Ethan, having offered to stay when Sarah had a family emergency. The meltdown began with the first thunderclap. Ethan started stimming intensely, his hands pressing against his ears, a sharp sound of distress escaping his throat. David tried everything Rachel had taught him, offering Ethan's favorite blanket, trying noise-canceling headphones, offering comfort toys. Nothing worked. Ethan's escalation accelerated. His movements became more frantic, his sounds louder and more desperate. Panic rose in David's chest. This was the kind of moment that had terrified him 3 years ago, the kind of situation that made him want to run. He picked up the phone to call Rachel, but then he stopped. No, he wasn't going to run. Not this time. He forced himself to breathe, to calm down, remembering what he had learned in the support groups and in sessions with Dr. Thompson. Ethan was feeling something intense. He needed a safe space to feel it, not someone trying to stop his feelings. David sat on the floor, not too close to Ethan, but close enough to be present. He began to sing, softly, a song he had heard Keisha use in therapy. His voice was shaky, off-key, but calm and steady. Ethan continued his meltdown, but David didn't stop singing. He just stayed there, present, steady, not trying to fix him, simply being an anchor. Gradually, very gradually, Ethan began to calm. His movements slowed. His sound softened. Then, suddenly, he threw himself against David, pressing his small body into David's chest, seeking deep pressure, seeking connection. David carefully wrapped his arms around him, maintaining firm but gentle pressure, continuing to hum. They stayed like that for 20 minutes, David holding Ethan, while the storm outside slowly subsided. When Rachel finally arrived home, soaked from running from the garage to the door, heart pounding with worry, she found David and Ethan asleep together on the living room floor. Ethan's small body still pressed to David's chest, David's arms still wrapped protectively around his son. Rachel stood at the doorway, hand over her mouth, tears streaming freely. This image, this moment of father and son connected after a literal and metaphorical storm, was something she never thought she would witness. She quietly took a photo with her phone, knowing Ethan would want to remember this moment when he was older. Then she gently covered them with a blanket and let them sleep. When David woke an hour later, he found Rachel in the kitchen preparing hot chocolate, one of her special comfort recipes. "How is he?" she asked immediately. He's okay, David said, his voice still hoarse from singing. He had a big meltdown. The storm really dysregulated him, but we got through it together. You didn't call me, Rachel noted. I was going to, David admitted. But then I realized I needed to do this. I needed to show him, and myself, that I can be present when it's hard, that I won't run just because it gets difficult. Rachel poured 2 cups of hot chocolate and sat at the table, gesturing for David to do the same. You stayed, she said simply. I stayed, he confirmed. And you'll keep staying? When it's hard again, because it will be hard again. Many times. I will, David said with conviction. I'm not that man anymore, Rachel. I can't be. I won't be. Rachel sipped her chocolate, considering her next words carefully. I have to tell you something, she said finally. Patricia, my business partner in Highland Park, wants to expand. She wants to open a second boutique in Austin and wants my pieces sold exclusively there. It's a huge opportunity. Could triple my income. That's amazing, David said, genuinely happy for her. You deserve it. But it means traveling to Austin once a month, at least for a few days, Rachel continued. For meetings, to set up displays, to meet the new clientele. I was going to take Ethan, but Sarah can't travel because of school, and I don't want to disrupt his routine that drastically. She paused, looking directly at David. I'm thinking of asking you to stay with him during these trips. The silence that followed was heavy. David understood the enormity of what she was saying. She was considering trusting him with full responsibility for Ethan, something that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Would you trust me to do that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I'm starting to trust, Rachel said. What happened today? The way you handled the meltdown, the way you stayed, that means something. But I need to know if you're ready, if you can do it. David thought about the responsibility she was offering, being the sole caregiver for Ethan for days, managing his routines, needs, challenges. 3 years ago, the idea would have made him run. But now, I want to do it, he said. But I want to do it right. Teach me everything, every detail of his routine, every sign he's dysregulated, every way to help him. I'll take notes. I'll practice. And if at any point you feel I'm not ready, you tell me. Rachel nodded, something loosening a little more inside her. Okay, the first trip is in 6 weeks. That gives us time to prepare. The following 6 weeks were intense. Rachel created a detailed manual of Ethan's routine, each aspect carefully documented. Meal times, food preferences, nothing touching on the plate, specific textures he tolerated. Sleep routines, signs of sensory overload, regulation strategies. David studied the manual as if his life depended on it. He asked endless questions, took notes, practiced under Rachel's supervision. They started with short periods, David being alone with Ethan for 2 hours, while Rachel went to the shop. Then 4 hours, then a full day. You're micromanaging, Jennifer observed one afternoon when she visited and found Rachel obsessively checking her phone while David was at the park with Ethan. I know, Rachel admitted, unable to stop glancing at her phone. But what if he needs me? What if something goes wrong? Rachel, you need to let go a little, Jennifer said gently. Not just for David's sake, but for yours. You've spent 3 years being the sole responsible party for everything. It's okay to let someone help. But what if he leaves again? What if he gives up? Then you'll deal with it, Jennifer said. But you can't live in fear of the what if. You have to give him the chance to prove he's changed. Rachel's phone buzzed. A message from David with a photo. Ethan on the swing, eyes closed, the slightest curve of contentment on his lips. The caption read, "He's loving it. We'll stay a bit longer." Tears stung Rachel's eyes. He's really trying. Yes, he is, Jennifer agreed. And you know what? It's working. As the travel date approached, Rachel found herself confronting feelings she had buried deeply, not just about trusting David, but about her own need for control, her difficulty letting go, her deep-seated fear of abandoning Ethan even for a few days. I feel guilty, she admitted to Miriam in one of her therapy sessions, as if I'm choosing my business over my child. You're not choosing one over the other, Miriam gently corrected. You're balancing your needs and his. Part of raising a healthy child, any child, is modeling that adults can have full lives that include work, purpose, and self-care. But Ethan isn't any child, Rachel argued. He needs me. He needs you, Miriam agreed. And he will always have you. But he also needs to learn he can trust others. That the world isn't just you and him against everything. And David, if he's really changed, can be part of that support network. And if I'm making a huge mistake, then you learn and adjust, Miriam said. But Rachel, you can't live in survival mode forever. There comes a point where you need to start thriving. And that means letting go a little, trusting a little, taking a little risk. The night before her departure for Austin, Rachel was in Ethan's room, watching him sleep. David appeared quietly in the doorway, respecting the moment but wanting to speak. I won't disappoint you, he said softly. I promise. Rachel turned to look at him, the soft light from the hallway illuminating his face. You say that, but you said it before too, David. You promised in front of God and everyone when we got married, and you broke that promise. David accepted the words as the blow they were. I know, and you have every right not to believe me, but this time it's different. I'm different. How can I know that? Rachel asked, not with anger, but with genuine need to understand. David stepped into the room and stood beside her, both watching Ethan sleep peacefully. Because now I know what I lost, he said. 3 years ago, I saw autism and thought limitations. Now I see him and see infinite possibilities. I see a child who paints artwork people pay hundreds of dollars for, who can identify patterns adults can't see, who feels love so deeply that when he chooses to share it, it's the most precious gift in the world. He paused, wiping tears from his own eyes. I ran because I was afraid. Afraid I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't handle it, that I would fail. And by running, I guaranteed my failure. But now, after the accident, after nearly dying, after receiving a second chance I didn't deserve, I know the only real failure would be not trying. It would be letting fear win again. Rachel was silent for a long moment, letting his words sink in. He likes it when you sing to him at night, she finally said. He won't show it, but he likes it. And if he wakes up in the middle of the night, which sometimes happens, he will look for me. You can sit in the hallway outside his room, where he can see you. That's usually enough. I'll remember, David said, pulling out the small notebook he now carried everywhere, taking notes. And if he refuses food, don't force him. Offer the alternatives on the list. He always eats eventually, just on his own time. Understood. And David, Rachel said, turning to face him fully. If anything goes wrong, if you feel overwhelmed, you call me. No matter the hour, I can be back in 3 hours. There's no shame in asking for help. I'll call if I need to, David promised. But Rachel, I won't need to. We'll be fine. I swear. Rachel wanted to believe him. Part of her, a growing part, did. But the overprotective mother in her, the part who had been both parent and guardian for 3 years, still trembled with fear. The next morning, Rachel left for Austin with a heavy heart and her phone in hand. She called before even leaving Dallas, then when she stopped for coffee, and again when she arrived at the hotel. We're fine, David reassured each time, patience infinite in his voice. Ethan ate breakfast. We're heading to therapy with Keisha now. He's wearing the blue shirt he likes. Everything's okay. The first night was the hardest. Rachel stayed up late, watching her phone, waiting for an emergency message that never came. In the morning, she found a photo from David. Ethan sleeping peacefully in his bed, his favorite blanket pulled up to his chin. He slept through the night. We're doing well. Focus on your work. We love you. We love you. The words made Rachel pause. David had included himself in that love, reclaiming his place in the family. And for the first time, Rachel didn't feel anger. She felt possibility. The 3 days in Austin were productive. Rachel impressed Patricia and her new partners with her artistic vision and professionalism. She made valuable contacts, secured contracts that would elevate her business to a new level. And in every moment of success, She found herself wishing she could share it with someone who would understand. She called David on the final night. "How was the meeting?" he asked immediately, genuine interest in his voice. "Amazing," Rachel said, surprised to find she wanted to share. "They want to triple the initial order, and there's an art gallery in Austin interested in doing a show exclusively with Ethan's paintings." "Rachel, that's fantastic," David exclaimed. "Ethan, your mom is incredible. She's conquering the world." Rachel could hear Ethan's happy sound in the background, a joyful noise he made when content. "How is he?" she asked, that maternal concern never completely absent. "He's great. We baked cookies today. Well, I baked and he sorted them by size. And he completed a 500-piece puzzle on his own. 500. I couldn't have done that before the accident, much less now." Rachel laughed, a genuine, light sound she hadn't made in a long time. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon," she said. "We'll be waiting," David replied. "But no rush. We're really fine." And they were. When Rachel returned home the next day, she found the house clean, Ethan happy and regulated, and David tired, but glowing with pride. "We did it," he said simply as she entered. Rachel looked at Ethan, who ran to her for one of his rare, precious hugs, then looked at David. "You did it," she agreed, and something fundamental shifted in that moment. Christmas was approaching, and Rachel found herself in unfamiliar territory. For the first time in 3 years, she had to consider David in holiday plans. Ethan had vague memories of his early Christmases, but the last 3 had been just Rachel and him, plus Jennifer and Sarah, creating their own traditions. "What do you want to do for Christmas?" Rachel asked David one evening as they decorated the tree. Ethan was fascinated by the lights, lining up the ornaments by color even after Rachel had strategically placed them. I don't know," David admitted. "What do you normally do?" "Normally we go to Jennifer's house for dinner, but this year she's visiting her family in California." "Could we do something here?" David suggested carefully. "Something small, just the 3 of us? Or is that too much?" Rachel considered. The idea of a family Christmas, something she had thought dead forever, now hovered as a fragile possibility. "We can try," she finally said, "but keep it simple. No big expectations. Just see how it goes." Ethan had a complex relationship with holidays. The change in routine, the excessive sounds and lights, the social expectations. Everything could be overwhelming. But over the years, Rachel had learned to adapt celebrations to his needs. "We do everything on Christmas Eve," she explained to David. "Simple dinner, open gifts early. On Christmas Day, we keep it completely normal. Regular routine. That prevents overload." David absorbed every detail, mentally taking notes. He wanted to do it right, to create a good memory for Ethan, for all of them. On Christmas Eve, Dallas was unusually cold. Rachel prepared Ethan's favorite dinner, buttered pasta, specific brand, cooked exactly 5 minutes, broccoli cut into small, uniform pieces, and grilled chicken pieces. For herself and David, she had made a small turkey with sides. They ate in the dining room, Ethan in his special rotating chair. The movement helped regulate him. Rachel and David on opposite sides of the table. There was a strangeness to the normality of it, a family dining together as if the past 3 years hadn't happened. "This is good," David said, not just about the food. He looked around the table, at the wife who had forgiven him more than he deserved, at the son he was learning to know. "This is really good." After dinner, they gathered near the tree. Rachel had chosen Ethan's gifts carefully. A new 1,000-piece puzzle with geometric patterns he would love, a set of sensory textures, a book about jazz with detailed illustrations. David had asked Rachel for help choosing gifts, but had added something on his own, a custom weighted blanket in shades of blue that he knew Ethan loved. He had researched the sensory benefits, found the best company, and chosen every detail. When Ethan opened that gift and immediately wrapped himself in it, his face showing that expression of pure contentment he had when something comforted him deeply, David felt tears stream down his face. He loved it. Rachel said softly, watching the scene, "You chose perfectly." "I wanted to get it right," David said, wiping his tears. "I wanted to show him I pay attention, that I see what he needs." Rachel had gifts for David too, chosen carefully. A book about understanding autism written by autistic adults, a t-shirt from a parent support group he had mentioned liking, and a framed photo, the one she had taken after the storm, of David and Ethan asleep together. David held the photo with trembling hands. You kept this." "I kept it," Rachel admitted, "because it was the moment I truly began to believe you had changed." "Can I put it in my room?" David asked, hope vulnerable in his voice. "It's yours," Rachel said simply. But it was David's gift to Rachel that made her completely break down. He had created something with the help of Maria and Lisa from the shop, a handcrafted frame, painstakingly made by his still recovering hands, enclosing a letter written in his awkward post-accident handwriting. "Rachel," the letter began, "there are no words enough to apologize for what I did. There is no way to recover lost time. But I want you to know that every day I spend here, every moment I have with you and Ethan, I see who you have become. You are not just a survivor. You are a force of nature. You took broken pieces and built something stronger than what existed before. You have taught me true courage, unconditional love, forgiveness that does not erase the past but opens doors to the future. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for letting me know our incredible son. Thank you for being the extraordinary woman you are. With all my love and admiration, David." Rachel read the letter 3 times, tears blurring her vision. She looked at David, who was nervously watching, waiting for her reaction. You did this?" she asked, touching the carefully crafted frame. "Maria and Lisa taught me," David admitted. "It took weeks. My fine motor skills are still a bit impaired since the accident, but I wanted to make something with my own hands, something that showed how much." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Rachel understood. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging the frame to her chest. "It's perfect." They put Ethan to bed together, Rachel singing his usual songs, while David stood in the doorway, watching. When Ethan finally fell asleep, wrapped in his new blanket, they returned to the living room, where the tree lights softly twinkled. "Can I ask you something?" David said as they sat on the couch, keeping a respectful distance, but sharing the space. "Sure. Do you think you could ever forgive me completely? Not just tolerate my presence or give me a chance, but truly forgive?" Rachel stayed silent for a long moment, considering the question carefully. "I think forgiveness isn't a destination," she finally said. "It's a journey. Some days I wake and feel I've fully forgiven. Other days I still feel anger for the lost time, for the pain you caused. But with each passing day, each time you show Ethan that he can trust you, each effort you make, forgiveness becomes a little easier." "I can live with that," David said. "I can live working every day to deserve your forgiveness, even if it never fully comes." "You know what's strange?" Rachel said, a small smile touching her lips. "I never thought I'd get here. When you left, I thought the hatred would be forever, that the anger would define me. But then I discovered carrying anger was like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. I had to let go for me, not for you." "And did it make a difference?" David asked. "Letting go? Every difference in the world," Rachel admitted. "It freed me to build a real life, not just survive. It allowed me to see Ethan not as my solitary burden, but as my gift. It made me stronger than I knew I could be." "You've always been strong," David said. "I was just too weak to see it." They sat in comfortable silence, the tree lights casting soft patterns across the room. For the first time in 3 years, Rachel allowed herself to imagine a possibility she had completely closed off. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could be a family again. Not the family they were before, that was dead and buried, but something new, built on stronger foundations of forgiveness, understanding, and love tested by fire. January brought an unexpected challenge. The special education school where Ethan studied was organizing a family day, an event where parents and children participated in activities together. Rachel always went alone, creating good memories, but always with a pang of sadness for the absence of a second parent. "I would like to go," David said when Rachel mentioned the event. If you think it's appropriate." Rachel hesitated. This would make it public, confirming to the outside world that David was back in their lives. The other mothers knew her story, had witnessed her solo journey. What would they think? "Let me talk to Ethan," she finally said. Using Ethan's communication cards, Rachel explained the event. "Family day at school. Mom is going. Dad wants to go too. Do you want Dad to go?" Ethan looked at the cards carefully, then looked at David, who was waiting nervously on the other side of the room. Then, surprising them both, Ethan walked over to David and placed his hand in his, a clear gesture of acceptance. "I think that's a yes," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. Family Day was held on a sunny Saturday in January. The school had transformed the gym into activity stations adapted for different sensory and developmental needs. There was a painting area, a music station, puzzles, tactile toys, even a quiet room for children who needed a break. When Rachel entered with David and Ethan, she immediately felt the looks. The other mothers, especially those who had been by her side during the hard years, watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to gentle judgment. Lisa Chun, whose daughter May was also autistic, approached first. "Rachel," she said, looking at David with obvious surprise. "I didn't know that." "Lisa, this is David," Rachel said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Ethan's father. He is back in our lives." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Lisa knew the story, knew the pain. They all did. "Hello," David said, extending his hand. "I know you've probably heard things about me. True things. I abandoned my family when Ethan was diagnosed. I was a coward, but I'm here now, trying to make up for it, trying to be the father he always deserved." Lisa looked at the extended hand, then at Rachel, seeking guidance. Rachel gave a small nod. "Welcome back then," Lisa said, shaking his hand, though her voice carried caution. "But if you hurt her again—" "I won't," David said firmly. "Never again." The morning progressed, with Ethan guiding them through the different stations. He was particularly fascinated by the music station, where adapted instruments allowed the children to explore sounds. David watched, amazed, as Ethan created complex rhythmic patterns on a drum, his concentration absolute. "He has real talent," said Mr. Rodriguez, Ethan's music teacher. "I've been recommending formal music therapy. I think he could thrive in it." "We can make that happen," David said, looking to Rachel for confirmation. She nodded. It was during lunch, while families gathered in the cafeteria, that the incident happened that would test everything. An older boy, visibly frustrated by something, began having an intense meltdown. He was screaming, throwing things, completely dysregulated. For Ethan, who was sensitive to loud sounds and chaos, it was too much. He began to enter his own meltdown, his hands covering his ears, his body starting to rock violently. Rachel immediately went into action mode, guiding Ethan quickly to the quiet room. But David stayed behind, watching the scene in the cafeteria. The other boys' parents were clearly overwhelmed, trying to calm their son, while others looked on judgmentally. Without thinking twice, David approached. "Can I help?" he asked gently the father, who was holding the struggling boy. I don't know what to do," the father admitted, tears in his eyes. "We're new to this. He was diagnosed just 3 months ago." "Deep pressure sometimes helps," David suggested, remembering what he had learned with Ethan, and moving away from the stimuli. "There's a quiet room over there." Together, they guided the boy away from the crowd. David showed the father techniques he had learned, shared strategies that worked with Ethan. Gradually, the boy began to calm down. "Thank you," the father said, deep gratitude in his voice. You seem to know a lot about this." "I'm learning," David said honestly. "My son is autistic, and I wasn't there when I should have been, but I'm trying to make up for it now, trying to be the kind of father these incredible kids deserve." Rachel had witnessed everything from inside the quiet room, where Ethan was starting to regulate with his noise-canceling headphones and his blanket. She saw David, the man who had run from autism 3 years ago, now voluntarily helping another family on the same journey. When David finally came to check on Ethan, Rachel pulled him into the hallway. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," David replied simply. I looked at that father and saw myself 3 years ago. Scared, lost, about to make decisions he'll regret. I thought that if I could help, if I could share what I've learned, maybe I could stop him from making the same mistakes I made. Rachel felt something fundamental break inside her, the last remnant of protection around her heart. This wasn't performative. It wasn't David trying to impress her. It was genuine. "You really changed," she said, not as a question but as a statement. "I had to change," David replied. "The man I was didn't deserve you to, so I became someone who could." On the way home, with Ethan tired but content in the back seat, Rachel asked a question that had been forming in her mind for weeks. "David, what do you want? Long term, I mean. From this situation?" David stayed silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I want to be Ethan's father," he finally said. "For real. Not a visitor. Not someone who lives in the guest room waiting to see if he'll be kicked out. I want to be present in every day of his life, in the good and the bad. I want to watch him grow, help him navigate the world, be someone he knows he can rely on." He paused, then continued more quietly. "And I want you, Rachel. Not the way we were before. I know that's dead. But I want to be your partner again, if you'll let me. I want to build something new, something stronger, based on who we've become, not who we were." Rachel drove in silence for several blocks, processing his words. "I don't know if I can be your wife again," she finally said. "That wound is still very raw. The divorce was finalized. Legally, symbolically, we're done." "I know," David said, "and I accept that. But Rachel, divorces can be undone. Marriages can be rebuilt. I'm not asking for that now. I'm just saying that I still love you. I never stopped. And if someday, at any point in the future, you feel like you can give me that chance too, I'll be here, waiting, working to deserve you every day." Rachel felt tears burn her eyes. "I need time." "You have all the time in the world," David assured her. "I'm not going anywhere." Spring arrived in Dallas, bringing bluebonnet flowers that covered the fields in vibrant blue carpets. Rachel had planned a day trip to the Dallas Arboretum, an outing that Ethan especially loved during flower season. "You can come, if you want," she said to David at breakfast. It was no longer a loaded question, just a natural invitation. "I'd love to," David replied, a smile lighting up his face. The Arboretum was crowded that sunny Saturday, families everywhere enjoying the perfect weather. Ethan had his noise-canceling headphones on, but he was clearly happy, his attention captured by the vibrant colors and patterns of the flowers. David followed him with a camera he had purchased specifically to document moments with Ethan. He photographed the little moments. Ethan carefully touching a petal, Ethan aligning stones by size, Ethan with that expression of pure concentration he had when he was completely absorbed in something. "You're getting good at this," Rachel commented, looking at the photos on David's camera. "I realized I missed so many moments," David said. 3 years of firsts I'll never get back. So now, I document everything. Every little victory. Every beautiful moment. I never want to forget how lucky I am to have been given a second chance." They found a quiet spot for a picnic under a huge tree that provided perfect shade. Ethan ate his carefully prepared sandwiches, crustless bread, cut into perfect squares, then wandered off to explore a nearby flower bed. "He's so big," David observed, watching Ethan. "Sometimes I look at him and can't believe he's the same baby I held in the hospital 6 years ago." "He's grown so much," Rachel agreed, "especially in the last few months. Have you noticed how he's using more words?" "I have. And yesterday he looked me in the eye for a whole second. I know it doesn't seem like much, but for him, it's huge." Rachel nodded, pride shining in her eyes. "Dr. Thompson says he's progressing beyond expectations. All the work, all the therapies, are paying off." "And you," David said, turning to look at her. "You're different too. Lighter somehow." Rachel considered this. It was true. In recent weeks, she had felt something shifting inside her. The weight she had carried for so long was gradually dissipating. "I think it's because I'm not carrying everything alone anymore," she admitted. "When you show up for Ethan, when you share the worries, the decisions, the celebrations, it's like I can finally breathe fully." "I should have been there from the beginning," David said, guilt still coloring his voice. Yes, you should have. Rachel agreed, not softening the truth. But you weren't, and we survived. And now you're here, and that matters too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Ethan explore. It was Rachel who finally broke the silence with a question that had been on her mind. Do you remember when we met? At SMU, that awful fraternity party neither of us wanted to be at. David laughed, the memory lighting up his face. You were hiding in the backyard, reading a book under a tree in the middle of a party. And you brought 2 cups of punch and said if we were going to be antisocial strangers, we might as well be antisocial strangers together. Best decision I ever made, David said softly. We were so young, Rachel continued, her voice carrying nostalgia, so full of plans, of dreams about how our life would be perfect. And then life happened, David said, and it wasn't perfect. It was hard and scary, and I wasn't prepared. Neither of us was, Rachel said, but the difference is I stayed and learned, and you ran, and spent 3 years in a hell of regret, David added, knowing I had destroyed the best thing I ever had, knowing I had abandoned my son. Rachel looked at him, really looked. She saw the physical scars from the accident, still visible on his forehead and arm. But she also saw deeper scars, the emotional ones, from carrying the weight of his choices. You know what Miriam, my therapist, told me? Rachel asked. She said forgiveness isn't forgetting the past. It's releasing the power the past has over your future. And have you let go? David asked, barely daring to hope. I'm trying, Rachel said honestly. Some days are easier than others. But David, you're doing the work. You're proving, every day, that you've changed. And that makes a difference. Ethan came running back at that moment, holding a flower he had found. He extended it to Rachel, one of his rare spontaneous gestures of sharing. Thank you, my love, Rachel said, accepting the flower with reverence. It's beautiful. Ethan then turned and ran off again, but this time toward David. He took David's hand and pulled, wanting to show him something. David looked at Rachel with eyes bright with unshed tears. He wants to show me something. Then go, Rachel said, smiling. He's inviting you into his world. That's a gift. David let Ethan lead him to a flower bed where butterflies fluttered from flower to flower. Ethan was fascinated by the patterns on their wings, the way they moved, and he wanted to share that wonder with his father. Rachel watched from a distance, her heart expanding in a way she hadn't thought possible. Seeing her son connect with his father, seeing David respond with such gentleness and patience, was a miracle she had stopped believing could happen. She pulled out her phone and photographed the scene. Father and son crouched together, watching butterflies, connected in a moment of pure shared wonder. She knew she would keep that photo forever, evidence that redemption was possible, that people could change, and that families could be rebuilt in new and beautiful ways. May brought news that would change everything for Rachel's business. Patricia called one Tuesday morning, her voice vibrating with excitement. Rachel, you need to sit down for this, she said. I have a proposal. A big one. A national home decor company had taken an interest in Ethan's vision, the line based on Ethan's paintings. They wanted to license his designs for an entire collection. Textiles, wallpaper, framed art, even bedding. They're offering a 6-figure contract, Patricia said, with ongoing royalties. Rachel, this could make you financially secure for life. Secure Ethan. Rachel was speechless. Financial security, something she had struggled so hard to achieve, was now being offered on a silver platter. But there's a condition, Patricia continued. They want to meet Ethan. They want to make a short documentary about him, about how his art is created, about his journey with autism. It would be great for awareness, but I know it's a lot of exposure. Rachel hung up the phone in a daze. She immediately called Miriam, needing to process before making any decision. This is a huge decision, Miriam said after hearing everything. How do you feel about it? Terrified, Rachel admitted, and excited, and confused. It's everything I wanted for the business, but it means exposing Ethan to the world, making him public. What does Ethan want? Miriam asked. I'm not sure he can fully understand what it means, Rachel said. He's 6. How do I explain cameras, documentaries, public recognition? You do it the way you always do, Miriam said, with honesty, visual cards, giving him choice wherever possible. That night, Rachel gathered David and, using Ethan's communication cards, explained the situation as best she could. People like your paintings, she said, showing cards with images of his artwork. They want to put your paintings in many homes, but they want to meet you first. They want to make a video of you painting. Ethan looked at the cards carefully. Then he picked up his tablet, where he had a more advanced communication app, and slowly typed. People like Ethan's paintings? Yes, Rachel said, tears filling her eyes. Many people. They think your paintings are beautiful. Ethan processed this, then typed again. Okay. Video okay. Rachel looked at David, shock and pride mixed on his face. He is giving permission. He is, David confirmed, his own voice thick with emotion. Our son is making an informed choice about his own life. But Rachel still had concerns. David, this will make us public. Our story, our divorce, everything will come out. People will judge. Let them judge, David said with conviction. Our story is about redemption, about forgiveness, about love that survives even the worst mistakes. If this can help other families, if it can show parents who abandon their children that it's never too late to come back, then it's worth it. Are you sure? Rachel asked. This will expose your mistakes to the world. I've already done it in the support group, David reminded her. And you know what happened? 3 different dads reached out to me afterward. 3 dads who had left their families after autism diagnoses and were thinking of returning. I told them my story, shared my journey, and 2 of them contacted their families. 2 of them are trying to fix what they broke. He took Rachel's hands, his eyes locking with hers with intensity. If our story can save a family, if it can stop a father from making the mistake I did, then every bit of judgment is worth it. Rachel felt tears streaming down her face. When did you become so brave? When I realized I had something valuable to offer, David said. Not success, not perfection, but honesty about failure and the possibility of redemption. 2 weeks later, a film crew arrived at their home. They were professionals who worked specifically with neurodivergent children, patient and respectful of Ethan's needs. They filmed Ethan painting, his hands moving confidently across the canvas, creating patterns that were both complex and beautiful. They filmed Rachel explaining her journey, her voice steady as she spoke about abandonment, struggle, and rebuilding. And they filmed David telling his story without excuses, without softening, just raw truth about fear, cowardice, and the long road back to his family. I abandoned my son when he was 3 years old, David said directly to the camera, tears freely flowing. Because I was scared, because I couldn't handle the fact that he was different, and I lost 3 years of his life. 3 years I will never get back, but I was given a second chance, a chance I didn't deserve, and I will not waste it. He looked at where Ethan was painting, completely absorbed in his art. My son is extraordinary. He sees the world in ways most of us never will. He creates beauty in ways that defy convention, and he has taught me more about love, forgiveness, and courage than anyone else in my life. If you are a parent thinking of giving up because your child is different, please don't. Don't make my mistake. Stay. Fight. Learn. Your child is worth it. The film crew was silent when David finished, several members discreetly wiping tears. That was powerful, the director whispered. This will touch many hearts. The documentary was released 2 months later, along with the announcement of the Ethan's Vision collection. The response was overwhelming. The story went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Some were judgmental, people criticizing David for his initial abandonment. But the majority were different. They were stories from other families, other struggles, other journeys of redemption. My husband left me when our daughter was diagnosed. I sent him your video. He watched it and cried. We are talking for the first time in 2 years. I was that dad. I left. But after seeing this, I called. My son is 5 now, and I don't know him. But I will get to know him. Thank you for showing me it's not too late. I'm an autistic adult. My father abandoned me when I was 7. Seeing this story of redemption gave me hope that maybe one day he could come back too. Rachel read the comments with tears streaming down her face. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Media wanting interviews, autism organizations wanting her to speak, other mothers wanting to share their stories. We started something, David said, hugging her as they read together. Something bigger than us. We gave a voice to families who feel invisible. Rachel agreed. We showed that there isn't just one way to be a family, one journey, that even from the worst situations, something beautiful can emerge. Sales of the Ethan's Vision collection skyrocketed. The company quickly expanded the line, barely keeping up with demand. Rachel had to hire more assistants, expand the store, open a second location. And through it all, Ethan continued to simply be Ethan, painting because he loved it, not for fame or money. Lining up his cars, hugging his favorite blanket, existing in his own beautiful, unique world. It was the eve of Ethan's 7th birthday, exactly 4 years since the diagnosis that had changed everything. Rachel was in the kitchen preparing Ethan's favorite cake, simple chocolate, no frosting, cut into perfectly square pieces, when David entered, wearing a serious expression. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, nervousness clear in his voice. "Of course," Rachel said, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is it?" David led her to the living room, where they could speak in private, while Ethan played in his room. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, his hands trembling slightly. "About us, about our family, about the future." Rachel felt her heart race. "Okay, it's been almost a year since I came back into your lives," David continued. "A year of trials, growth, rebuilding. And I know I hurt you in ways that will never fully heal. I know I broke trust that took years to rebuild." "David, where are you going with this?" Rachel asked, anxiety mounting. David took a deep breath, then knelt before her. Rachel stifled a gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. "I'm not asking you to marry me again," David said quickly, seeing her panic. "Not yet. Maybe never, if you don't want to. But I'm asking for something different." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, but when he opened it, there wasn't a ring inside. There was a key. "This is the key to an apartment I signed a lease for today," David explained. "It's 15 minutes from here. Small, but perfect for me, because I think it's time I move out of the guest room." Rachel felt immediate tears. You're leaving?" "No," David said firmly. "Never. But I'm giving your space back. This house is yours. You built it. You deserve it. But I'll be nearby. I'll be here every day for Ethan if you allow it. For dinners, bedtime routines, weekends. But you won't have to see me at breakfast if you don't want to. You won't have to share your sacred space with me." "But why?" Rachel asked, confused. "I thought things were going well." "They're going well," David assured her. "So well that I realized something. You'll never be able to choose to want me back if I'm always here out of necessity. If I live here because I have nowhere else, you'll never know if you keep me out of love or convenience, or for Ethan." He gently took her hand. "So I'm giving you choice. Real choice. I'll be nearby, present in Ethan's life, but I'll be in my own space. And if someday, at any point, you decide you want me back, not as a tenant but as a partner, you'll know it's because you truly want it. Not because it's easier, not because you're used to me, but because you choose it." Rachel openly cried now, conflicted emotions swirling inside her. Part of her wanted to beg him to stay, admit that she already wanted him back. But another part, the part that had grown so much over these 4 years, recognized the wisdom in what he was doing. "When did you get so smart?" she asked through her tears. "Miriam suggested it," David admitted. "I started seeing her too. Individual therapy. She helped me understand that true love doesn't hold. It frees." "You are freeing me," Rachel said, realization dawning. "I'm giving you back your space, your autonomy, your choice," David confirmed. "Because you deserve to have all of those things." Rachel looked at the key in his hand, then at his face, seeing the sincerity, the love, and the strength it took to do this. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. Don't say anything, David said, closing her fingers around the key. Just know that I'm here. Always. Not going anywhere, but giving you space to breathe, to think, to decide what you want your future to be. On Ethan's birthday, they hosted a small party. Jennifer and Sarah, Maria and Lisa from the shop, Dr. Thompson and Keisha, a few families from the support group. Ethan wore his noise-canceling headphones, but was clearly happy, surrounded by people who loved and understood him. David had moved his things to the apartment that morning, but he was present for the entire party. He was no longer a resident, but still part of the family. When it was time for the cake, everyone sang quietly, knowing Ethan was sensitive to noise. Ethan blew out the candles with help, then immediately went to his favorite gift, a new set of professional paints Rachel had specially ordered. He's so happy, Jennifer observed, watching Ethan examine each paint color meticulously. You did an amazing job, Rachel. We did, Rachel corrected, looking at David helping Ethan open another gift. It took time and pain, and we almost lost everything. But look where we are now. Are you going to get back together? Jennifer asked, curious. I don't know, Rachel admitted honestly. But for the first time, it's a real possibility. Not because I have to, not because it's easier, but because maybe I want to. That's progress, Jennifer said, hugging her friend. Later that night, after everyone had left and Ethan was asleep, exhausted but happy, Rachel was in the kitchen cleaning when David appeared. I'm heading out, he said. But today was perfect. Thank you for letting me be part of it. You're his father, Rachel said simply. You will always be part of it. David nodded, beginning to turn, but then Rachel spoke again. David, wait. He paused, turning back toward her. I just want you to know, Rachel began, choosing her words carefully, that what you did, giving me space, giving me choice, it means everything. And I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know you proved something important. You proved that your love isn't about possession or convenience. It's about wanting the best for me, even if it doesn't directly benefit you. Always, David said with emotion. Your well-being, Ethan's happiness, that's what matters. So here's what I propose, Rachel said, surprised at her own courage. Let's do this the right way this time. Let's date. David blinked, surprised. Date, Rachel confirmed, a small smile playing on her lips. You take me to dinner. We talk, not about Ethan or logistics, but about us. We go to the movies, walk in the park, get to know each other again, not as the people we were 8 years ago, but as the people we are now. You want that? David asked, barely daring to believe. I want to see if what I feel is real, Rachel said honestly. If it's rebuilt love or just familiar comfort. And the only way to find out is to do it the right way. No pressure, no living together out of convenience, just getting to know each other again. Tears filled David's eyes. I would love that, more than anything. Then pick me up Friday at 7, Rachel said, genuinely smiling now. And David, don't be late. I won't, David promised, his voice thick with emotion. Never again. The small cafe in the Bishop Arts district was crowded on a sunny Saturday morning. Rachel and David sat at a table outside, coffee and croissants between them, watching the bustle of the neighborhood that Rachel loved so much. The past 6 months had been a revelation. They dated twice a week, rediscovering each other without the pressure of living together or expectations of immediate reconciliation. They talked for hours about everything, from their dreams and fears to their opinions on silly movies. And slowly, carefully, Rachel felt something blooming within her. It wasn't the young, naive love of her 20s. It was something deeper, stronger, tempered by pain but more resilient because of it. I have something to tell you, Rachel said, placing her coffee cup down. David looked at her, nervousness and hope mixed in his expression. I forgave you, Rachel said simply. Completely. Not because you deserved it or because enough time had passed, but because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. And because you have proven, every day for almost 1.5 years, that you have changed, that the man who abandoned Ethan died in that accident, and someone better was reborn. David felt tears streaming down his face, with no attempt to hide them. "Thank you," he whispered. That means everything." "And there's more," Rachel continued, her own heart racing. "I love you, David. Not the same way as before. Better, deeper, more real. And if you still want me, if you still want to rebuild what we destroyed, then I'm willing to try." David was speechless, too much emotion to process. "You're saying," he began, barely daring to finish. "I'm saying we can reschedule," Rachel said, smiling through her own tears. "Not now. Not yet. We need to do it right. Have a real engagement. Plan a wedding that celebrates who we become, not who we were. But yes, David, I want to try again. I want to build a life together, a family together. You, me, and Ethan." David stood from his chair and moved to her side of the table, kneeling beside her right there in the crowded cafe. "Rachel Morrison," he said, his voice broken but strong, "I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of this second chance. I promise to be the father Ethan deserves, the partner you deserve. I promise never to run again, never to give up, never to let fear overpower love. Will you marry me? Again, the right way this time." Rachel pulled him into a tight embrace, both of them crying openly as other cafe patrons applauded around them. "Yes," she whispered into his ear. 8,000 times yes. That night, they told Ethan together, using his communication cards and tablet. They explained that Mommy and Daddy were going to get married again, that they were going to be a family again. Ethan processed the information in his unique way, his eyes moving between the two of them. Then he did something extraordinary. He took both of their hands and placed his own small hand on top. "Family," he said clearly, one of the few words he used confidently. "Yes, my love," Rachel said, tears streaming freely. "Family, forever this time," David added, looking at their rebuilt little family. 2 years later, Rachel stood on stage at a national conference on neurodiversity. Beside her was David, and in the front rows, surrounded by therapists he trusted, sat Ethan, now 9 years old, wearing his headphones but clearly paying attention. "Our story is not unique," Rachel told an audience of over 1,000 people. "There are many families facing abandonment, trauma, challenges that seem impossible. But we are here to say that redemption is possible, that people can change, that families can be rebuilt." David took the microphone. "I abandoned my son when he was 3. It's the worst thing I've ever done, the decision I regret the most. But I learned that one mistake, even a terrible one, doesn't have to define the rest of your story. You can choose to grow, to change, to do better. And for any parent here who is struggling," Rachel continued, her voice strong and clear, "who is wondering if they can do it, if it's worth it, let me tell you it is. Your children, in all their beautiful neurodiversity, are gifts. They will teach you more about love, resilience, and joy than you can imagine. But you have to stay. You have to fight. You have to love them where they are, not where you want them to be." They showed slides of Ethan's growth, his paintings now in homes around the world, pictures of their rebuilt family. "And for parents who left," David said, his voice breaking slightly, "it's not too late. Never too late to come back, to apologize, to do the work of rebuilding. It will be hard. You'll have to prove yourself every day. But if you are willing to do it, if you are willing to truly change, there is hope." When they finished, the audience rose in applause. But for Rachel and David, the only applause that mattered came from Ethan, who clapped in his unique way, 3 firm beats that were his way of showing approval. That night, in their home where they now all lived together, Rachel put Ethan to bed. She sang his usual songs, adjusted his blanket the way he liked it, kissed his forehead. "Good night, my miracle," she whispered. David waited in the hallway. Together, they descended to the living room, where Rachel's creations had expanded to include a full home studio. On the walls were photos of their journey. Rachel alone with baby Ethan, Ethan in various therapies, David in the hospital, the family reunion, the small intimate second wedding they had 6 months ago. "Can you believe how far we've come?" David asked, wrapping Rachel in his arms. "Some days it still feels surreal," Rachel admitted, leaning into him. "That you're really here. That we really made it work." It was you, David said. Your strength, your forgiveness, your willingness to give me a chance when I didn't deserve it. It was both of us, Rachel corrected. Your humility, your willingness to do the work, your genuine transformation. And more than anything, it was Ethan. He was the bridge between us. He taught me about unconditional love, and he taught you what really matters. He saved us, David agreed, in the ways that matter most. Rachel turned in his arms to face him. You know what's most incredible? It's not that we got back together. It's that we became better. I am stronger than I was before. You are more compassionate. And together, we are building something more solid than we had before. Built on foundations of forgiveness and redemption, David said. And love, Rachel added. Always love. They stood there, embracing in the home they had built together, literally and metaphorically. A home filled with art created by hands that saw the world differently. Walls painted in calming tones chosen with their child's sensory needs in mind, and love that had survived the worst and emerged even stronger. Rachel's phone buzzed with a notification. She looked and smiled. Another comment on the documentary, she said to David. Listen to this. My husband left us 6 months ago when our son was diagnosed. I was full of anger, thinking I could never forgive him. But watching your story gave me hope. He watched the video and called today. We are talking tomorrow. I don't know if we'll get back together, but maybe we can co-parent at least. Thank you for showing there's light at the end of the tunnel. Another family, David said, his voice thick with emotion. Another chance at redemption. Our pain became purpose, Rachel said. Our story is helping others. And Ethan, David added, looking toward the stairs where their son slept, is changing the world with his art, showing people that different doesn't mean less, that neurodiversity is beautiful. Rachel thought of the whole journey. For years ago, she was alone, terrified, broken by abandonment. She couldn't imagine a future with hope, let alone happiness. And now here she was, with a thriving business, a flourishing child, and a rebuilt love that was stronger for having been tested. You know what I learned through all of this? Rachel asked. What? David replied. That forgiveness is not weakness. It's the most powerful strength there is. Not forgiving to forget or excuse, but forgiving to release, to break chains, to allow growth and healing and new possibilities. And that it's never too late to change, David added, to do the right thing, to become who you should be. And most of all, Rachel said, her voice soft but firm, that unconditional love isn't just about loving when it's easy. It's about loving through the pain, through the differences, through the challenges. It's seeing the person, the whole person, and choosing to stay. David pulled her closer. I choose to stay. Every day for the rest of my life, I choose to stay. And I choose to let you stay, Rachel said. I choose to build this future with you. Upstairs, unaware of their deep conversation, Ethan slept peacefully. His weighted blanket was pulled comfortably. His cars lined up perfectly beside the bed. His headphones ready on the nightstand for the next day. On the walls were his own paintings, bursts of color and patterns showing how he saw the world. And in his mind, even while sleeping, Ethan processed his day in his unique way. He had felt his parents' love, felt safety, felt that he belonged. He didn't fully understand the journey his family had taken to get here, but he understood what mattered. He was loved, unconditionally, completely, exactly as he was. The next day, Rachel would post a new photo on Instagram, which now had over 500,000 followers. It would be a simple photo. David and Ethan on the floor together, working on a puzzle, Texas morning sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating them in gold. The caption would read, "For years ago, I was alone, broken, not knowing how I would survive. Today, I have a thriving business, an extraordinary son who is changing the world with his art, and a rebuilt love that is stronger for having been tested. To any parent struggling today, you will survive, you will grow, and one day, you will look back and see that your greatest pain became your greatest purpose. Keep fighting. Your children are worth every tear, every sleepless night, every hard moment. And if you are someone who left and is thinking of returning, It's not too late. Never too late. Do the work. Change for real. And maybe, just maybe, you can also find redemption. Hashtag autism awareness, hashtag second chances, hashtag unconditional love, hashtag Ethan's vision, hashtag warrior mom, hashtag redemption. The comments came by the thousands. Stories of other families, other struggles, other victories. And in every comment, in every share, in every person touched by their story, the journey of Rachel, David, and Ethan continued to make a difference. Because in the end, their story wasn't just about autism. It wasn't just about abandonment or forgiveness. It was about the human capacity to grow, change, and love beyond one's own limitations. It was about finding strength where you thought there was only weakness. It was about building something beautiful from broken pieces. It was about hope. And while Dallas slept outside, its city lights twinkling like earthly stars, inside that Lake Highlands home, a rebuilt family rested. Not perfect, because families never are, but whole, healed, and full of love that had survived the worst and emerged even stronger. Rachel Morrison had died inside when her husband abandoned their autistic son, but she had been reborn, stronger than ever, building an empire of creativity and compassion on the ashes of her pain. And when David returned, broken and desperate, it was the same son he had rejected who built the bridge back, who showed the way, who saved not just a father, but an entire family. Ethan didn't know he was a hero. He only knew he painted because he loved colors, aligned his cars because patterns calmed him, and sometimes hugged his parents because deep down in his unique heart, he loved them. And that love, pure and unconditional, was the most powerful thing of all. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about hope, forgiveness, and second chances. Are you a single mom raising a child with special needs? Have you experienced abandonment? Or perhaps you are someone who left and is thinking about coming back. Share your story in the comments. This is a supportive, judgment-free community where every journey is valid. And remember, no matter how dark the night seems, dawn always comes. Keep fighting, keep loving, keep believing that better days are on their way, because they are. Until the next video, warrior moms and dads, you are stronger than you imagine, braver than you believe, and more loved than you know. A big hug, and see you soon.